This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, April 13th, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of our community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all district stakeholders. Dr. Helen, we have some items in the table file. Will you update us?
Yes, we have a few items in the table file this evening. In the financial forecast follow-up related to potential budget restorations, there is a second option for consideration around the special services restructuring. This will be an item for individual action at the April 27th board meeting. We've also included an updated document for the later school start times discussion with an altered timeline. And then several personnel items are also in the consent agenda. So that's what we have this evening for the table file.
Okay. If there are no objections, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented? Thank you, Amy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Right, motion passes. Item 3 is our public comment section, and we do have 2 people signed up. So I will read our policy and then call you up. This is an opportunity for residents, business, and property owners, parents, guardians, student, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with this guideline. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the chair, identify yourself, and if you represent a group, we require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. The board has allotted up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at regular school board meetings. I will now begin to call those who have signed up to speak in the order in which they signed in. Board Clerk, Maggie, will you be doing the time for us? I'm not sure why I have that on here. Usually our Vice Chair, Corey Butler, will monitor the speaker's time, and so we'll have him monitor it tonight as well. He will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30 seconds, and 10 seconds. Please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. Okay, the first person that I'll be calling up is Christine Howard. Welcome. Oh, Christine, oh, there you are.
One moment, please. Okay. Here. All right. All right, I'm Christine Howard. I'm a speech language pathologist at Spring Creek and GVP, and I have 2 kids in the district in elementary and middle school. There's 2 things happening simultaneously. I'm going to use all my 3 minutes and go as fast as I can. I want to speak briefly about the special ed restructuring that's happening and the gen ed, the budget restorations that are coming. The special ed restructuring, we just got a new proposal today, and so everything that I was thinking I would say has changed. From what I think I understand, and please, I don't claim to know everything, so if I make mistakes, I would love to be corrected at some point somehow. From what I understand, this newer proposal would leave 1 psych at each school building, which would be fantastic if that happened. Having 1 psych at each building would more closely align with the professional organization of the school psychs ideal of having 1 psych per 500 to 700 students, and that also gives the the consistency and the uniformity that we want to see with school psychs interacting with not only the students and the special ed staff, but also the gen ed staff. There's a lot of relationships that are built there. And if this isn't the case, then I would hope to see from admin something about some clear plan for how the admin that's in the building certain days of the week, but not other days of the week, how they would form those relationships, kind of maybe an official, I don't know, plan for how those relationships would be made, who would be on the crisis team, what exactly the role would be for the admin who are there. And then moving on to the budget restorations. From what I understand, the proposal is to bring back 2.4 FTEs of admin and then 1.0 for social studies at the middle school. And this is so great that we are able to bring back some people who were let go last year. That's fantastic that we're able to do that with the budget. I would love to see, well, there's two parts. One is that I would love to consider bringing back more of teachers instead of only administration. I don't know exactly how that would look, but I know that there are some, for example, third grade at Spring Creek, the non-compañeros classes have 29 students each, and that is, in my opinion, way too many students when they're 8 and 9 years old. And when admin is saying that we want to support students and that's why we're hiring admin, I want to make sure that that's balanced with support that's kind of on the ground every day. I also would like to just consider the timing of bringing back the administration. While Matt Hillman has said that he wants to leave the district in a strong position for the new leadership, I absolutely respect that, and I agree that we should do that as much as possible. But I want to just maybe consider doing the minimum amount of admin hiring now so that the new leadership can decide exactly what positions to bring back, if there's room for bringing back positions later, and even more specifically, who would be in those positions so that they would have a say as they're gearing up in the new leadership role for how it would be run from their perspective. Thank you very much for listening to my perspectives.
Thank you so much. And then our second speaker is Joanne McLeese. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Joanna McLeese. I am a resident of Northfield. I am also currently a substitute teacher in the district, and I've been a part of the team at NCEC for about the last 5 years. First as an educational assistant in special education. I loved it so much I went back to school to get my license in early childhood and early childhood special education, became an early childhood special education teacher, and have long-term subbed a couple times. I've been in the school a lot, and I want to talk to you about the proposed elimination of the ECSE coordinator position. I think it's really important that we carefully consider the needs of students, vulnerable students in that birth to 5 period, families and their needs in that time, and that this important job not fall upon teachers and service providers and EAs who are working hard to do their daily jobs. So I'm concerned that we have someone who has the knowledge, the experience in early childhood special education, be filling that role, be on site, and be helping make those decisions that make a difference every day for staff, for students, for families. I just want to urge you to really consider, please, that I understand it may need to be a reduction in FTE, but that it be a position with specialized knowledge and experience. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item is our announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, we have several this evening. There's quite a laundry list of success stories here, so we'll be brief as quickly as we can. Want to start off, congratulations to the Northfield High School Knowledge Bowl teams who competed in the state AAA meet last week, placing 2 teams in the top 6. The Northfield Gold team won the state championship in Class 3A, and the Maroon team finished 6th of 18 teams. So both Northfield High School Knowledge Bowl teams finished in the top 3rd at the state tournament. So congratulations to the coaches and all of those students. We're just very proud of their work. They've had a real successful run over the last several years. We also want to acknowledge that the Northfield School District was selected to receive a 2027 Grow Your Own Adult Pathway Grant. This grant is intended to continue the Northfield Teaching Fellows program that we've had for the last several years that supports diversifying our teaching staff through support of candidates who are seeking their teaching licensure. After winning the state championship at the state wrestling meet and earning her 3rd state title, Kaylee Graber was named Ms. Minnesota Wrestler of the Year by the Minnesota Wrestling Coaches Association. Quite an honor for Kaylee. Well done. We want to congratulate the Northfield. It's been a while since we've been here in regular meetings, so we want to congratulate the Northfield High School boys basketball team for placing 4th at the Class 3A state tournament, and congratulate Caden Oakland for being named the 2026 Class 3A boys basketball tournament team. And congratulations to head coach and Northfield Raider alumni Matt Christensen, who was named the Minnesota Basketball Coaches Association Class 3A Boys Basketball Coach of the Year for the state of Minnesota. So congratulations to Caden and Matt for being honored by their respective associations there. We also want to congratulate Northfield Middle School 6th grade choir students Ava Reister, Willa Ryland, Adele Holes, Ella Bannon, and Zoe Palm, who participated in the ACDA Minnesota 4, 5, 6 Honors Choir, and to Northfield Middle School 7th and 8th grade choir students Colton Woodland, Robert Steed, Virginia Page, Demaria Hutchinson, Nora Flannery, Gabby Biskins, Noel Berger, and Every Findley, who participated in the ACDA MN 7-8 choir. That's the Choral Directors Association of Minnesota. So again, just an outstanding middle school music program that we're so grateful to have, and thanks to Ms. Bendette and all of the work that she does with those programs. We also want to let board members and the community know that based on feedback from our district's communications committee, residents of the district can expect later this week or early next week to receive a rebooted annual report. A printed annual report is something that we did for a long time, and we sunset it really when the push to digital communications took hold. And we've received a lot of feedback about people who are not getting the newspaper. You know, they might not be looking at social media, they might not be listening to the radio station, and how are we going to be able to communicate with them? So you're going to see a printed annual report that is similar to what we've done with some other communications in the past, integrated with a number of QR codes. We're actually inviting people, members of the community, to sign up for our district family newsletter. So all families who have students in the district get that newsletter, but people from the public could also sign up to get that. So we want board members to look for that and the community members to look for that, so that they have a number of ways that they can get additional information about the school district. So appreciate the communications committee's feedback on that. Again, trying to make sure that we are in partnership with our community. One of my favorite events of the year showing up this Friday, Arts a la carte, will be Friday, April 17th from 5:30 to 9 p.m. at the Northfield High School. And when they say at the Northfield High School, they mean the Northfield. It's all over the high school if you've not been to Arts a la carte. Admission is $5 per person and includes a variety of hands-on activities, student art displays, and more. We want to congratulate the Northfield High School Raider speech team members, Riley Shook and Elizabeth McCormick, who qualified for the state speech tournament last week in the section meet. Riley will compete in discussion, and Elizabeth will compete in great speeches. Congratulations, continuing the just storied history of our Raider speech squad. And finally, I just want to make sure everyone who's in the assembly knows that we know that there's the potential for severe weather this evening, and so just want people to be aware. I think you're actually in the safest place, at least in the school district. This building was built as a nuclear fallout shelter, and so this is that space. So even if we hear the sirens outside, this is where we would come to, should there be a severe weather emergency. So just want everyone to know that. Those are our announcements for this evening.
That's a fantastic list of announcements and
It
honors,
absolutely
and
is.
congratulations. That's great. Item 5 is our items for discussion and reports. And first we have Director of Child Nutrition, Stephanie Stormy, presenting the proposed 2026-27 Child Nutrition Fund budget. This will be an item for individual action at the May 11th meeting. Welcome, Stephanie.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me here to speak on behalf of the Child Nutrition Department. I just wanted to mention that I know many of you have seen this strategic plan, the vision, our commitments, but it's something, even as the Child Nutrition Department, that we refer to when we're trying to make decisions for the district and our department. The Child Nutrition Department shares in responsibility and understands the importance of fostering the students in the district and making sure that we have an impact on every student's social, emotional well-being. Our goal is that we will provide quality, nutritious meals for those students. And these are actual pictures of some of the items that we have available. One of my favorites is the lower middle picture. You can kind of see the steam coming off of the vegetables. Those are peppers for the fajitas that we have served at the middle school and high school. In the next few slides, I'm going to be discussing some of the meal participation data from this school year, comparing it to previous school years, and kind of what we have seen as a trend. These are also pictures of our students as they've gone through the lines, and some of them at Spring Creek this year. We had a fun event. It was Fancy Day, so the students got to dress up for lunch. We had linen tablecloths, and we had lights and everything for them. There was music playing, a dessert cart going around and serving them. So that was a fun event. And then during Kindness Week, we served Johnny Pops, which is actually was developed by some local students here at St. Olaf. And so we have a student there who had Johnny Pop Day and received those during Kindness Week. As of January 31st of this year, we have served over 60,900 meals for our students just for breakfast alone. This was a decrease, we think, by about 7% if you're looking at the overall comparison of previous years. And one thing to consider is that we did have 3 fewer student contact days this year versus last year. And by that, I mean we did have the one snow day in January, but we also had 2 fewer calendar days that matched up to last year as well. We know that breakfast really helps to increase concentration for the kids, and it can get their day started out the right way if they have full tummies as they begin their day at school. So as I had mentioned, the previous slide went over kind of our overall numbers, and this is a better representation because we actually took the number of meals served based on the average daily attendance. So you can see that the decrease in the number of meals served this school year versus previous school years is actually a smaller percentage. So we kind of closed that gap a little bit, which just shows that enrollment has played a big difference in our meal participation. So as of January 31st, for lunches, we have served over 223,000 lunches, and this was a decrease of approximately 2% with that overall number if you're comparing the previous 2 school years. But if you were to look at this graph again, it's a better indicator and gives a better representation and shows that we actually, based on the number of meals served in the comparison with the average daily attendance of our students, our participation is up, which is exciting to see because when you have enrollment down, but our numbers are still up, we're very pleased that that is happening. In addition to meals, breakfast and lunch served, we do also serve after-school snacks through the community school. So it's a partnership that we've created with them, and through February of this year, we've served over 10,000 snacks to our students at each of the elementaries and the middle school combined. Another partnership that we've created that we can support local businesses throughout Minnesota. So there are some local farms that you'll see here, such as Open Hands, Sogan Valley Farms, that we've used frequently in the district and are able to support those people and provide great quality meals to our students. So this is a list of a few of those farms. This year, somebody that's new to us is the Big Woods Beef from near Strand, and that's a beef teriyaki on the left-hand side there, beef teriyaki lo mein that was served at the high school on our global line. And then on the right, those are actually meatballs, kind of our version of Swedish meatballs on the global line was used Rancher's Legacy, which is another local beef company that we've been using. And we did increase, so we use their Minnesota beef patties, their Minnesota beef meatballs at at the high school, but this year we've introduced ground beef that is regional. They couldn't verify that it's all Minnesota beef, but it is regional, and that is now being served at all of our elementary schools. We were able to do that, just to step back on that, we're able to do that through some grant funds. We have remaining grant funds from a grant that we received about 2 years ago. And so we're able to use a lot of those funds to help support working with the farmers. So in addition to nutrition, a big part of child nutrition is wellness. And we know food is very important, but we also want to look at the social emotional learning of our children. And so we have the wellness policy, which we try and follow closely throughout the district, and we have a lot of support with that from staff and students. And not only is it important for us to look at the wellness of our students, but also the staff that work with us. So just one quick update or a note, the high school this year does a Bring Change to Mind, and that's a flex opportunity that they have. They have received some grant funding with that as well. But during the week of March 9th through the 13th, they had some activities that ran at the high school to really focus on that mental health and activities and making students aware and having conversations with that, to know that that's important to have those conversations. Another thing that we did is we created an end of quarter s'more newsletter, and that goes out in Dr. Hillman's family updates and also the staff update. One of the suggestions made through that was including more recipes, so we've brought some of those things in, some maybe cost savings ideas, in addition to photos that we have of the items that students are receiving here at the district. So next, I will walk you through our proposed school nutrition budget for the 26-27 school year. And I'll cover revenue assumptions, expenditure considerations, and our projected fund balance. One thing to note is the district, we are reimbursed $4.70 for each meal that we serve. The state gives us an additional 12.5 cents, so actually that value is $4.82 per meal. That doesn't just take into effect the food that we're serving. That cost also needs to cover, as you can see in this slide, the employee benefits, paperwork, repairs, labor, equipment, custodial costs. So there's a lot that needs to go into what we are serving for the students. So our revenue projections are based on the past 3 years of actual data, and we really focused on the 25-26 school year. As you can see here, the local sources that we have listed, those are things like staff meals, a la carte meals, our child care meals, which makes up a small amount of our revenue, but the majority of our revenue comes from the state and federal sources, which is our meal reimbursement. So that really is the meals that we're serving to students, and that's why it's so important that we have that meal participation with our students. Whoops, I want to go back. So for the revenue, we are projecting to have a revenue this coming, our next school year, of about $3 million. And so then on the expenditure side, we know that there's a lot of continued uncertainty in not just food costs, but vendors have been raising a lot of concerns, whether it be due to tariffs, maybe some global instability, supply chain concerns and pressures. But in addition to that, for the food side of things, we've also been required to purchase 90% of our product has to be domestic. And so we have to track all of those purchases. And Rachel, the admin assistant for child nutrition, has this amazing document where everything that comes through on our invoices, she's tracking whether it meets those standards or not. And so that just increases the complexity of what we're doing and how we're purchasing our foods, because we know a lot of these sources can be more expensive to purchase that impact our expenditures. And then salaries, we really looked at, we know that next year is they're looking at their contract. So we know that there's going to be some increases in salary and benefits for that. But one of the other reasons why our expenditure summary is higher than it has been in the past is because with the budget reductions or looking at the budget prioritization process, more of the chargeback was pulled from child nutrition back into the general fund. So there was a higher chargeback with that. You will notice that the food and supplies did slightly go down that we're projecting for next school year. And that's because we've seen some inflation, but we've seen it at, about 2 to 3%, and we have been able to cut back on some of our purchasing of our food. So we did reduce that a little bit for next year, but we'll continue to monitor that closely. And so we're projecting for next school year, proposing, $3.3 million for our expenditures. So when we're comparing revenue expenditures, we're projecting a shortfall for next school year, the 26-27 school year. And as you can see, our ending fund balance is at $162,000. So our goal really is to be at that 14%, which is what the school district is typically at for its goals also. And that would be about $463,000. So you can see that we're projecting a significant shortfall with that. Part of that is due to the fact that we did have more funds pulled in the budget prioritization process, but we are anticipating that we're going to end this school year a little bit better because we're seeing that our expenses are lower than what we had anticipated, and we're hoping that our revenue will stay as we've been monitoring it. It's, at where we're expecting it to be, if not a little bit higher. So we're hoping those two will balance out, and we'll see a little bit more in our fund balance at the end of this school year. So like I had said, 162,000 is where we're at. The other thing to point out is in the 24 school year and the 25 school year, we did some intentional spending down of our fund balance, and that's because MDE requires us to be at a certain max. And they had been at a 6-month max, and now they're reducing that to a 3-month max. And so those were things that we intentionally spent down so that we didn't receive a letter from MDE stating that, these are the things that you need to put into place with your program. So like I said, we're expecting to finish next year projecting with a fund balance of $162,000, but we will continue to monitor closely and make sure that we're rebuilding that in the future years to come. So with that, I just want to thank my child nutrition staff. It's very important that they get noted. I feel like in this presentation, because they work so hard every day, they're the ones that are out there and doing all of the work, working with the students, engaging with them, and we hear great things, great feedback, shout outs we receive frequently from them, or parents and things like that about the things that they're doing for kids. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for their presentation, and the food choices looked amazing, so I'm just blown away by that. Well done. Board members, do you have any questions at this time or comments? Okay, we'll go with Jenny and then Amy.
Thanks, Claudia. I have a question about the free breakfasts.
Yeah.
I know in the past we've talked about it, and I'm trying to figure out the structure at each level, because I'm just looking that it's equitable for all students are. I know they're all offered breakfast.
Yep.
But I also know that the students who ride buses, that doesn't always work out. But I'm trying to get a picture of how it actually works at each. So at elementary, the kids who ride the bus are able to receive breakfast items in the classroom or not anymore?
Not in the classroom. What they'll do is they come down to the cafeteria, and depending on what time it's at, like if it's after a first bell or a second bell, they may receive a bag lunch or a big breakfast, and that will go back with them to the classroom. So they are able to get that. If they do have enough time, if the bus arrives and they have time to sit in the cafeteria, go through the line, then they will be able to sit there.
Okay, and if their bus arrives and they don't have enough time to actually go through that line, do they have any options?
They would get the bag that they can take back to their classroom.
Okay, so before actually arriving in their classroom, they have to stop in the cafeteria and get the bag
Yes. Yep.
and bring that. Okay,
Yep.
and then how does that work for students riding the bus at the middle school?
The same with the middle school. They can come and go through the line, and I believe then if the bell has rang, I don't know if it's the first bell or the second bell, then they might get like a pass that would send them back to the classroom. But it's monitored pretty closely so that those kids aren't just kind of out there just thinking, we're going to wait and go through the line and then be late to class and head up there.
Okay, and then how does it work at the high school for kids who ride the bus?
It's open until the second bell rings, probably a little bit after the second bell rings, and then the students can come down and go through. It's in the cafeteria, so where the bus drops off, it's kind of that main door. We specifically moved, we had been serving breakfast a couple of years ago down in the lower cafeteria, and it wasn't as convenient for the kids who are getting off the bus in the morning, so we moved it upstairs into the main cafeteria space so that it was closer for them to grab and do that.
So then if they get there a little late and they decide to receive the breakfast, do they receive a pass then so that they're not late to their class?
That, I don't know, they wouldn't receive it from us, so they may have to go into the office and get that. I'm not aware of that.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Okay, Amy.
I have several questions, but first, welcome, Stephanie. We're always happy to hear from you and all the good work that you do for the district. How much do we get reimbursed for breakfast?
It is about $2.46. I knew that would be asked, so I looked it up this afternoon.
And so my question is, I love that we give free lunches, but I worry that the state is not reimbursing us enough for the lunches and the breakfast for all of the food and the labor and all of the pieces that go into it. And I'm wondering if you have a sense, since our fund balance is dropping, will we reach a point where we won't have enough reimbursed by the state to cover our expenses?
I know that's something that's continually, and Val, feel free to jump in whenever you want, but that they're looking at. And when we go up to the state capitol, we're always pushing for more funds, which we know lots of people want funds for their program. But I know at the national level too, they're really looking at how can we fund the programs. One thing is with the change in the dietary guidelines, they're really looking at more scratch cooking and what is that going to look like for us and how is that going to impact school nutrition programs and how much more would we need per meal. So I know there's been a lot of proposals out there. At this time when we're figuring this out, we don't really know if there's going to be any increase in reimbursement rates for next year. So I don't know if you have any additional things to add.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think one of the challenges is with this budget is we do not get the rate increase until the summer. And so we're planning with a completely unknown. We like to assume there will be an increase, but given the state's budget, that's not a for sure. And even the federal rates, I don't think we're notified until the summertime. So it's likely that it will look slightly different. That's when she presented, she said like the revenue and expenditures look better this year than the budget says that it will, but we don't really know that till well after the board has to approve budgets.
So will any additional funds go to the fund balance then? Because I worry that the fund balance is actually very low projected.
Yes, the projection looks low for sure. But every time we end better, right, that does go, it's a contained fund, so it doesn't go anywhere else. I still think it's projected to spend down slightly, but not nearly. I think the actual is going to be less spent down than what's projected, which means that will make the forecast for the next year look better. But it's a concern we share, but there's very little wiggle room that we have other than just advocating at the legislature.
And I have a couple other questions.
Maybe do one more and then I'll come back to you.
Sure, this is more of a process question. What happens with your vegetarians? Is there vegetarian options? Is that still covered by the free lunches? Just if you could talk on that.
Yep, it is covered by that. So at the elementary schools, we have, the options that we have are, kind of cheese options, so it wouldn't necessarily meet the vegan. We do have the peanut butter sandwiches that can be substituted. Because it's more of a preference, it's something that we have a variety of items offered for them, and they can choose whether they want to have those or not. We do have salads also at the elementary level, and so some of those, sometimes they have worked if there's specific needs or something like that of modifying those menus. At the middle school, because they have more lines, they have more options when they go through, like at the sub line, they can certainly select, if they don't want to have meat, they can make just like a veggie sub or something like that. If it's cheese, something that they would eat as a protein, they can do that. We try and limit the almonds and the nuts just due to allergies and stuff like that. Tree nuts, those kind of things, we don't typically have a lot of. We do the peanut butter, but it's contained in a package that we have. So it's not like then it's spread from, one utensil to another utensil or something like that. We have tried doing things like bento boxes where we've had hummus. We do have hummus occasionally on the line that students can dip their vegetables in as a side. So that could also be used as a protein source if somebody wants to. And then at the middle school level, like I said, they can build their own salads, so they can go through and choose what options that they want. And then at the high school, we have pre-made salads, and we do have a vegetarian salad with that. We cup the cheese so that if they choose not to have the cheese on there, it's been portioned. It hasn't necessarily touched the product, but it is in there because we need to offer so much protein. But we will have hard-boiled eggs in there as an option. And, again, as they go through the line, they can make selections on various things.
Thank you.
Yep.
Robust. All right, Corey.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Couple questions for you. I appreciate you talking about the expenditures and the difficulty there with planning with the instability that you referenced. Couple questions related to that. The contracts you have with your suppliers, are they year to year, or are they kind of locked in for 2 to 3 years? I'm curious how their own employment agreements, wages, benefits, fuel costs might affect the bottom line for us.
Yep. Thank you for asking that, because that was something I was going to mention. We did just go out to bid for our RFP for our primary distributor. And so I don't know at this point how many came back. That was approved because we work with a co-op, so there's like 9 districts that we work with to kind of help improve our buying power. And so the base district is Minnetonka, and so that went to their school board for approval last week. But I believe we will be using IFD, who was our previous distributor the last several years. I think there were several people I know interested in going out to bid, whereas the last time we went out to bid, which would have been 3 or 4 years ago, we only got 1 distributor back because it was just a time of, difficulty with transportation and just providing that. So it wasn't probably as competitive. But so now we will re-sign with IFD, and then it's for up to 3-year renewals. So that's our primary distributor. Milk and bread, we do go out, so we do that, and then have a 2 to 3 year renewal period that we can renew with them each year if we want to, but kind of evaluate that. As far as supplies go, paper supplies, that's something that we evaluate every year. We kind of have a chart that we go through and we look at. They would like us to have at least 3 people, but we're required to have 2 if we have to go out for a quote or something like that.
That's helpful. And obviously, we're very fortunate to have so many good local suppliers, obviously not enough to provide for the whole district. Question related to the Buy America plan with 90%. Where are you seeing the most difficulty to fit that 10%? I'm assuming it's fresh produce that maybe isn't grown year-round in the States.
Yep, that's and that's the hardest part because our distributor isn't able to necessarily tell us, one week, the broccoli might come from California, but then the next week, depending on the weather or the availability, it might come from Mexico. So we really have a hard time with that. One thing that we've done is increase the amount of commodity produce that we're using. So when we know that it's coming in as a commodity, we know it has to meet the USDA requirements. So our frozen vegetables we're getting through commodities. A lot of our fresh produce, we're able to set aside dollars from DOD to be able to get that. So a large amount of it is coming from those sources. But kind of on our tracking document, a lot of that produce is questionable because it may come in and say, not growing in Minnesota necessarily, but at Cut Fruit, it, kind of was produced or they've kind of processed it. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yep. And we're still learning a lot on that too. MDE and USDA is providing guidance because this was the first year that we had to track that.
Amy, do you have another question?
I was just wondering, do you have a sense of why students don't participate? Why we have like 25% of the students when they're getting free food? And if you could speak on that. And also a related question is, how does our rate compare to other school districts, if you know that?
Yep. I would say at our elementary and middle schools, we have a very high percentage of students. I know they serve over 700 lunches a day at the middle school with, I think 900 kids that we have enrolled there. So I would say at the elementary schools and middle school, we see a high participation. Kind of maybe where there's room for improvements is at the high school, and that can be a lot of varying things. It might be just standing in line, not wanting to wait for that, or if there's other opportunities for them that they are able to pursue during the lunch hour. So I would say that's probably where we're seeing the lowest participation, which is pretty common across most high schools that you hear in the district or when we're having conversations with other people. We're hoping with the Reimagine Northfield with the high school, and when we have changed kind of our service model in there, we'll have more opportunities for different lines, different choices. Hopefully it will bring in a little more excitement for students, and we'll see that participation will go up that way.
Thank you.
Anyone else comment or question at this time? All right. Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, thank you.
Okay, our next item is the revised 25-26 and proposed 2026-27 Community Education Fund budgets. Director of Community Education Erin Bailey will present those revised and proposed budgets. These will be an item for individual action at the May 11th meeting. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Thank you for having me here tonight. Just as Stephanie did, I'm starting with the strategic plan and the vision for the district. And as you know, the Community Education Department is specifically called out on number 11 of the benchmarks. And I would also say that by the nature of the work that community education does, we are touching a lot, if not almost all of these benchmarks. And so it is really great to have different coordinators in different areas of the department really be so heavily involved in all areas of these benchmarks. Just as a reminder of some of the principles of community education, and this is the cover of our summer brochure, which came out about a week ago, so I'm hoping you have all received it in your households. Just a couple of data points for the last fiscal year, so this is for 2024-25. We did have just over 16,000 people participate in a community ed program. This is a duplicate count, but not a duplicate count of more. So let's say you attended our school age care program every day. for an entire school year, you are counted once. So you're counted only one time per program for every program that you may have attended. But so really happy with that number and the number of people from this community that have been touched by community ed. We also last year scheduled 142,130 hours of facility use through the community ed department. So that is hours outside of the school, the pre-K-12 school day. And so the buildings, as you all know, are heavily, heavily used. With it being April, we are coming on to a point where you could actually get some time in a gym right now if it's not doing what the weather is doing most of this week and raining. But the really heavily, especially building use from November, late October, November through March. And then the community ed department has roughly 600 employees, and these are everywhere from an instructor that might work a couple hours a week in a flag football program all the way through licensed teachers and other full-time staff. So really just fun to have that variety of people that are part of the department as well. And as we talk about the budget today, and as you are familiar with, the community ed budget is part of the 04 fund of the school district and not part of the general fund. And so you will see that it exists in the budget, but in a separate funding slot as well. And then, of course, just some reminder about some of the programs that make up the different areas of community education. As I mentioned, summer registration opened last Friday. It's off to a great start. We opened school-age kid ventures for the school year last Friday as well. Also had many people ready for an 8 o'clock registration. As you're also all aware, we are starting a remodel of the adult basic education spaces. That is going to start in just a little over a month. So in the planning process of getting that set up, and students that are very excited for that. And then we also have a community education advisory council that helps guide the work of this department. This presentation that you are seeing was presented to them last week, and they voted to bring what you are seeing forward to you as the school board for your consideration. This advisory council does meet 10 times a year. Members are appointed to 3-year terms. We do have 2 student members, and we also have a school board representative, which is Jenny. So, and a number of you, others of you, have also been on the Community Education Advisory Council too. And then, of course, these programs that you're seeing listed here are more heavily based at the Northfield Community Education Center. ECFE has had strong registration this whole year. We've actually continued to add more afternoon sessions based on participation interest. Hand in Hand Preschool we are at the lowest number of students we've had in Hand in Hand Preschool since we've moved into the NCEC. This is really due to declining birth rates. As you have all know and have planned for this, is to move through the system. This is where it starts, and so we are seeing that right now. Currently in Hand in Hand Preschool, our general education enrollment is 10 students lower than it was last year. And as you have heard, the special education projected numbers for next year are half of what they were 2 years ago. So we're really just seeing some decline in those numbers right now for the next year. Early Ventures Child Care Center, we only have openings next year in our room before kindergarten, so we do still continue to see consistent attendance in child care setting. Again, kids tend to move through that system and stay with us until they enroll in kindergarten. We did have, annually, we do have an unannounced visit from the Department of Human Services, who is our licensor. They did visit last week. I'm happy to report they had no citations. And I will say it's a visit where they look through lots of files, they ask staff lots of questions. And so it really kudos to those staff for a very successful visit last week. So as part of this presentation tonight, I'm also doing a budget revision for this current fiscal year. So this reflects the last couple of years of audited budgets along with what we adopted at this time last year and what the revisions are proposed to be. As you may remember, community education does have 4 fund balances, which you can see on the lower half of this chart. So just as a refresher, the programs that make up general community education would be the community education office, the recreation programs for both adults and youth, driver's education, youth and adult enrichment, both our Kid Ventures and Early Ventures programs, and then Project ABLE. ECFE is ECFE, and there's some home visiting dollars in there as well. School readiness fund balance would be our hand-in-hand preschool, our pathway scholarships, so both pathways 1 and 2, and then our Bridges to Kindergarten program. And unreserved is our early childhood screening fund. So while it appears as one fund balance on the bottom line, these funds are not allowed to be mixed. And so you all always see those called out as separate funds and then the corresponding programs in there. And so as you can see, we're projecting to end better than we originally had adopted last year at this time. So with a fund balance of $518,858. And much as your goal to have a 14% fund balance for the school district, that is also what we strive to do in community education as well. You will see we are not quite at that for this year or next year, but are working back in that direction. So as we moved into next year's budget, there are some assumptions, of course, because we are making a projection into the future. So for revenues, we did have slight increases in the revenue for fee-based programs based on the activity we're seeing this year. We also have an increase in the school age care levy to support students with the additional needs. When we run childcare centers in a school district, it does look a little different than running those in private settings. And what the level of support we would provide to students who may need additional support is what we are beholden to provide looks a little different than private settings as well. And so there is a school age care levy that allows us to levy dollars to support students in those settings. So for an example, last summer, and this will continue this summer, we have had a need for an ASL interpreter in our Kid Ventures setting. This school age care levy is where we would pay for that. So you're allowed to levy dollars for the supports that are needed in these programs. We've also seen an increase in program offerings. So, and this is exciting and based on people's interests or what instructors want to teach, but we have seen a pretty significant increase in the last couple of years, especially in the recreation and enrichment area. In adult basic education, and you see this both in the revenues and in the expenditures, this year we have started moving those staff to being district employees. So if you remember, we're in a consortium with Farmington and Randolph for the delivery of adult basic education. We do have the majority of the students, with about almost 80% of the adult basic education students of this consortium receiving their schooling in Northfield. And so, but with Farmington being the fiscal host, they were also the employer of these staff, which just poses some challenges technology-wise, having a badge for the building, trying to access the printer. And so we are, the staff that are in adult basic education that are now teaching in Northfield are district employees, and then we are billing back the cost to Farmington. So while it is a wash, it does both have an impact in the revenues and the expenditures. We also then have a number of students that are receiving Pathway 1 scholarships this year that will not age out of the building for next year and are still age eligible for those Pathway scholarships. So we're coming in at a higher revenue rate there than I would typically project, because I know these students are staying in the program. And then of course we have voluntary pre-K seats. And so the voluntary pre-K is money, again, that you are awarded these seats through the Department of Education. And students, it's another scholarship mechanism for students to attend preschool. We have been awarded 28 of these seats. The funding for these seats does come into the general fund, but it is where we do code back then some of the costs that we would have in our hand-in-hand preschool. And then for expenditures, just the appropriate increase in salaries, wages, and insurance. There has been a couple of updates in that since last year. As I talked about, just making sure we have the appropriate staff support for all children. This is something that can be harder to predict year to year of what student needs might come into the building. It's not exactly the same as a grade transferring from kindergarten into first grade. We are seeing a number of students for the first time. And so we do want to make sure we have appropriate care for those students. We did then start passing along the credit card processing fee, similar to what the district is doing as a whole. That started, we started passing that along to consumers as of January 5th of this year. That did not only have an impact on the revisions that we just looked at, but that also has an impact on moving forward for our budget for next year. And then I did touch on the adult basic education staff as well. So here is the proposed revenue for next year. When you are looking at this and seeing the local sources, the vast majority of the local sources are fees for programming. They're fees for childcare. They're when you sign up for swimming lessons. It's whatever you choose to enroll in. That is the vast majority of the local sources. Other things that are in that bucket would be the payment from the city of Northfield for the recreation programming. It would have some grants in there. It would have our scholarships that we receive for early learning. So just so you're aware what makes that up. And then as you look at federal aid, and for some who've heard this presentation over and over, in COVID, the federal funds were dedicated to making sure that childcare centers stayed open, so that when the COVID pandemic had passed, that there would still be childcares open and people available to work. And so those funds through COVID were federal funds that were awarded to childcare center. You applied, childcare centers could receive them. At that time, 70% of those funds were awarded, had to go back towards staff wages, and 30% would be awarded to the organization that was running the childcare center. As we transitioned further away from COVID, those funds were moved to states to do the awarding. They're called Great Start grants now, and they now 100% go to salaries, add on to salaries for staff of childcare centers. So that's where you see that we are, when you see federal aid that had been there that is not here in the revised or the proposal budget for next year, that is just, those funds are not funds that come to the organization anymore. And to receive these Great Start grants, which are great for employees, they do require work each month. So I just want to acknowledge Val's team and also Breezy Barrett in Early Ventures, because you have to record the hours that people worked with students. And so it's not without work that goes into that, but it is a great benefit for the employees. Sorry, I should say, so you are looking at a proposed revenue for next year at just over 4.5 million. And then when we look at the expenditures, much like you are all aware for the general fund budget, it's a people business. And so you are looking that the vast majority of our expenditures go to salaries and benefits, because they are people that are working with children on a daily basis. So as you can also see, our proposed expenditures for next year are also just slightly over 4.5 million. So then here is the proposed budget summary, and you again can see the audited results, but then the revisions that we are planning, and then the proposed budget for next year, which does have a slight addition to the fund balance in a positive way. Here is the history of the community education fund balance. I think this is just good to see, because there is so many factors that come into play for community education that can have direct impacts, because so much of our budget is driven by fees, and fees are directly driven by economic factors that happen. You can see here, it plays out in a fund balance that has gone up and down over the last couple decades. And of course, there's actually some variables that play in here that we have no control over. We are predicting that the program enrollment is similar to what we are seeing this year. We're assuming fee collection goes relatively like it has these past few years. Our software system that we changed to about 4 years ago has made fee collection. There's a much better dashboard for keeping track of accounts for people, so that has certainly helped. And then, of course, as I mentioned, student needs, and just making, the cost associated when we have a student that maybe needs that one-on-one support to be successful in our setting does certainly play into the budget as well. And then as you all know, and as Stephanie mentioned in her report, we do obviously a lot of out-of-school time programming, and that is not all necessarily appearing in the community ed budget, just depending on whether it's grants that are covering it that might be in the general fund by the nature of what they are. And there are also a significant amount of targeted services dollars that are tied to that, which is also in the general fund. So we do run community school sites in the Middle School Youth Center. And so community school sites are at all 3 elementary schools. Those, four of those sites have after-school programming, Monday through Thursday. And then when we talk about we have switched a little bit this year to a more limited evening programming at Greenville Park due to some of the grant funding that I will talk about. But we do still have more frequently than monthly, but not every week every Tuesday, Thursday like we used to do. We have a variety of programming that happens, as you can see, different activities. I have staffed the middle school youth center last Thursday and this Monday, and it's delightful to see the number of college staff that are involved and just really what kids get to do. And then, of course, some of the highlights, again, dental clinics have happened at all of the elementary sites. Ole's for Opportunity is a partner with St. Olaf College, and where their sports teams come in and they teach, they have clinics for elementary kids, which is really great. We've run break programming on both spring and winter and spring break, so just great activities happening. The challenge we've had in this area in the last, I will say now, year, we submitted a 21st Century Community Learning Center grant in March of 2025 that we have not had any response to. As you know, federal funds were paused in late June, and so that also paused the awarding of these grants last year. Those funds ultimately did come through, but later than MDE wished to actually start any of these grants because they were supposed to have a September 1 starting date, and it would have been really hard to do that. But there hasn't been a follow-up on what these grants will be doing. So those that have thus and other districts that submitted last March are still waiting for what that result will be. That 21st Century grant is what funded the Greenville Park Community School for the previous 11 years. And then we also have a full-service community school grant that we had completed that was originally due on March 30th, and about 3 days before they extended the deadline. They also changed the eligibility requirements at that time, which is a little challenging for us. We're not as probably favorable in their second iteration of criteria as we were in their first. Our grant application is done. We will submit it, but these, I think, what we are seeing is just less reliability that what grant opportunities are put out there can actually be moved out the door in a reasonable time, or that the funding is stable enough from the time it is announced until those grants are really received. So we have done a great job of braiding funding in a number of these programs, and so we're moving forward. Where you see some of the little tweaks is how much evening program we're offering in some places, more than you're not seeing any wholesale cancellation of programs. This is not how it looks on, well, when I sent the screen, but this is the number of students or contact hours we've had so far this year, which is just to say that we do have, you can see the number of students who are involved in here. So the total, which is cut off at the bottom, we've had 467 students attend 50 plus hours and 806 who have attended 1+ hours. I will say this is without a number of our significant events happening. So Gecko Gallery did happen last week. Those numbers are not included in there. The building was packed, so there will have a large number in there. That Gecko Gallery is a partnership between Community School at Greenville Park and the building as a whole. The same will happen this year for an all-star event celebration at Spring Creek. It'll again be a partnership between these two, both the school day operations and the community school. And then Cinco de Mayo is also run in a very similar manner. So want to just share the continued, also heavy use of these programs this year as well. And with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Excellent, thank you, Erin. We know we're in good hands under your leadership. And congratulations again to your team for not having any sightings on that DHS
I will share
visit.
that.
That's a big deal. Board members, do you have any questions or comments at this time? Questions? Okay, Ben?
Thanks. There we go. Thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
Good as always and impressive as always in terms of just what
Thank you.
falls under the community education umbrella. Just a few quick questions for the grant funds that we're waiting
Yeah.
on. Like, what's the total in terms of amount for those?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the 21st Century Grant would be up to a 6-year grant. So it was essentially as long as you're meeting your goals 3 years in, you can have up to 6 years. I believe we wrote that for about $250,000 a year. For the full service community school grant, that was also a 3-year grant for a $600,000 total, so roughly 200,000 a year. It's not quite split evenly that way, but it's,
Yeah, so
it's,
decent amount.
there's decent amount of
For
funding
the
there.
21st century one, so it was kind of held with MD. Do we have a sense? Is like not really like
Not yet. That funding, so the funding did obviously get released from the federal government last year. So at that time, they decided to continue funding the ones that were already awarded. So they award this in cohorts, and so others were already in their second or third year. So they continued to fund those and just pause the ones that were essentially starting a new cohort. And so there is a little bit of discussion about this funding again this year. I think so everybody's waiting to see how does that settle, because without the federal funding, there's no way to move forward with this too.
right. So it was anticipated. I mean, right, we were eligible this year had the funds been received.
Yes.
Thought that there'd be
Yeah, I mean, yes.
or-
Probably not back pay, but I'm hopeful that they would say, we'll just start your if you were a recipient, that they would still award for the duration of what they had anticipated they would do.
And then just one other question in terms of, student needs. I know, right, there's kid ventures, summer ventures. Are those funded similarly? Or if you have a student that has, kind of one-on-one needs in summer ventures, what does that look like
Yep.
in terms of
Yep.
kind of matching that? And source from?
Yep. And so this is where that school age care levy comes into play. And so we have program qualifications for each program. So when there is students with needs, we do share the program qualifications. And with that said, if we can provide the supports to make them successful in meeting those program qualifications and being successful in the program, we need to do so. And so that is where you see the that special needs levy for school age care, allowing that the ability to provide those support staff, code it to the levy, and as long as that makes that child successful to be able to meet those program qualifications, that's how we use it. This is you will hear, or you may hear, community education has done some lobbying for this at the early childhood level. So this is where you see students in early ventures who also need additional support to be successful in that setting, but there is not the same mechanism to support them. So as a school district running a child care center, we still have the same obligations to try to support that student without the same kind of funding or ability to levy the funding too.
Great. All right, Corey.
Hey, Aaron, just curious, 3 months into collecting those credit card fees, if you've received any feedback? Or if
No, very
those
little.
were
We
used to
deposit,
it because of the rest of the district?
we deposit more checks. I will say, so I think childcare bills can be large bills, especially at early ventures. And so we did add drop boxes at all 3 of our childcare sites. And then we have 2 drop boxes at the NCEC, one within a lobby and one outside. So I will say we received more checks. We didn't get a lot of negative feedback. We helped some assistance with some automatic, bill pay and things like that, but not people, I think, for the most part, understand that was a fee that we were absorbing that would allow us to have a better budget. And so I will say most families extremely understanding and are thankful for drop boxes in a lot of sites.
Thank you.
Great. All right, Amy.
Thank you, Erin. So many moving pieces to your budget. I have a couple questions for you. My first question is, if we don't get the federal grant money, or we currently haven't seen it, how does that actually affect programming? Are you still doing it anyway, and just hoping that it'll all work out, or what happens?
That's a great question. So this year we did, when it was clear that the 21st Century Grant was not going to come to fruition, or at least have an answer for this year, the last 11 years we've offered Tuesday and Thursday evening programming at Greenville Park, and the 21st Century had supported Greenville Park. So we have not done that. We kept all after school programming, all break programming the same, and went to kind of targeted evenings of programming. So it's not a Tuesday, Thursday consistent programming with routed bus loops, and that evening programming is where you really saw multi-generational activities happening. You saw parents coming back for activities, and it was early childhood was having some support at the NCEC. So that is not happening on the same. We have monthly family engagement at each building, but it's not the weekly program where kids might stay from after school, have a meal at Greenville Park and go into evening programming and be transported home. That's what's not happening right now. We are able to keep going at the level we are with just some cutbacks to evening program because we have other grants. And so we have other grants with the Healthy Community Initiative where community school is written in. So they are also providing some funding for some of the activities right now. And then this program is braided with targeted services as well too. And so we are able, for students who meet target services eligibility, we are able to invoice the state for the hours that they spend in programming, and they do have a reimbursement rate. And that's, again, on the front side, nobody knows who we're reimbursing on and who we're not. And on the back side, we are able to collect those dollars, and that becomes the fund too that makes these programs sustainable as well.
And great, thank you. My second question is, you stated that you wanted all of your budgets to be in the black. And you still have $46,000 projected for the general community ed budget to be in the red.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what's your strategy to get that budget in the
Yeah,
black?
that's a great question. And the biggest driver, as you all know, because we've even had work sessions on it, is the fact that early ventures falls into the general community education budget, and that is where, as you've all heard me say before, the math in child care, especially in birth to 5 child care, is hard math to do. What it costs to charge someone for child care. So in an infant in early ventures right now, it's about $16,500, and it doesn't cover all of our costs. And so this is where things that we have done, so where you start to see some of this incremental increase to that fund balance area next year, and overall is we have the credit card fees were part of it. We have also we've set up with Val support too, and help the kind of how we will continue to increase fees in a way that helps us get reimbursed some of what it costs to run this, while also trying to make it feasible that families can continue to stay in the program. And then we continue, talking with people too about things that I've also talked with you. What are reimbursement rates in this, and what they look like in Rice County versus what you get reimbursed if you live in Dakota County. So if you're a family that is receiving the Child Care County Assistance Program, the reimbursement rate for someone to attend Early Ventures is dramatically different if you live in Rice County versus if you live in Dakota County, which also plays into that. So that has been some of our lobbying work as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comment, questions? All right, thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is the financial forecast follow-up with potential budget restorations. This will be an item for individual action at our next regular meeting. Dr. Hellman and Val Merderstorff, our Director of Finance, will present.
Yes, so this is the second meeting of 3 that we plan to discuss this. This was presented last week at the special meeting. Caleb Davidson, our incoming Director of Special Services, is also here to talk about the updated option for the Special Services restructuring. I'm just going to give the brief overview because we gave a longer overview last week, but people come to this conversation at different times. So, of course, board members and community know that we are in a stronger financial position than we had anticipated. So we are fortunate to be able to have some recommended restorations. We also know that we have some of the most significant administrative transition that we've seen in decades. And so wanting to make sure that the district is set up for the best success that they can moving forward. So the proposed reductions proposed restorations, prefer saying that word over the former one, would be to return the Human Resources Director to full-time from 0.6 to 1.0. As you recall, Molly Wieselman, our current HR Director, retired at the end of last year and then came back at 0.6 to save district funds so we could prioritize building-level programming. Same thing with the Instructional Services Director position. When Hope Langston retired, we chose not to replace that position last year. And again, in order to prioritize building level programming and moving into a different scenario next year with a different leadership team, really believe that that is an essential tool in supporting folks across the district. We also, I'm going to skip the Special Services Department right now. Middle school social studies, again, this likely would have been a contingency FTE add. Remember, contingency FTE is something that the district holds and then distributes to specialized hotspots across the district with class size. So we still have 1.0 FTE in the budget that was retained as part of the budget process. And that middle school social studies would likely have been a second FTE of that, but the changes in the standards that are going into effect really necessitated going back to 2.0 social studies FTE specifically at 8th grade. And then you'll see we have a couple of changes in terms of elevating the high school dean of students position back to an assistant principal role, but at a fewer number of days than what the other current assistant principal is at now. And to pay for that, reducing, not to pay for all of it, but to pay for some of that, reducing the high school principal contract from 235 days to 192 days. And that proposal was discussed and brought to the board after discussion with Shane Byer, who will be the interim high school principal next year, thinking through how can we make sure that we create the additional capacity that has been requested at the high school while still maintaining fiscal stewardship. Last week, we proposed a special services restructuring. At that time, we've received feedback from staff and from others about that proposal. So I'd like Caleb Davidson to come and talk about the second option that we're proposing to the board that was shared with staff today, really after hearing that feedback, specifically at the elementary level.
Yeah, good evening. So I had 4 listening sessions last week with our early childhood team and then our 3 elementary teams, and kind of heard about their feedback as the proposal impacts those teams the most. So kind of heard some of their thoughts and ideas, some concerns with the current proposal, and maybe some insights or processes that were missed through the initial proposal. So this proposal is similar. It still reduces the early childhood special education coordinator position to design and build 2 assistant director positions. And then there's some different pieces that are changed, including reducing the extra duty days of our instruction and inclusion coach, reducing available funds for special services administrative professional development. And then we would not reduce the school psychologist. We would maintain our 6 FTE school psychologists, but through a purchase service agreement, we would sell approximately 0.4 FTE to a neighboring district.
So I think as Caleb and I are happy to stand for questions, I do want to just really clarify the part around the assistant director positions, because I think if you initially look at it, it appears there's an additional FTE of administration, which I can understand how you would look at it and see that, but really you have 2 administrative positions already, an early childhood special education coordinator and an assistant director position. You're still going to have 2 administrative positions at the end of this potential restructuring, but what it's doing is having 2 assistant directors rather than 1 and the early childhood special education coordinator. The key part is the ECSE coordinator is not year-round at this point. That position will become year-round. There'd be a modification of the salary to both of those positions to come into line with the responsibilities that would be responsible for in that job. And again, looking at other similar districts that have a similar kind of structure. So the key part is that there's still 2 administrative positions at the end. They look a little different, and they're attempted to be distributed so that the assistant directors are able to be with buildings on a more regular basis. Right now, 2, a director and assistant director trying to cover, the 5 typical buildings, the 3 elementary schools and the middle school and high school, has proved challenging just with the growing student needs. So this is an attempt to use that FTE and be flexible and be able to respond to staff and student needs more quickly. And so again, you still have 2 administrative positions, they're just slightly differently configured.
Yep.
I'd be happy to take questions about any of the items that are on the table.
Board members, any questions or comments? Okay, Corey? Yeah. I was just trying to figure out who else had a question or comment.
Hey, Caleb. I have a question concerning the 0.4 FTE purchase service agreement. Conceptually, understand how that works. Is it just an employee would work 2 days, 2 solid full days for someone else? Would it be split days? How does that work with an agreement?
Yeah, we would most likely have one of our school psychologists work with another district 2 days a week through a purchase service agreement. Val has a few more details with that, and I've through some channels I've already discussed, and there's districts, there's a market for this, and there would be people who would be open to this if this proposal would be selected.
And these are districts likely that have different budget scenarios where they cannot have full staff psychologists on site like we do?
Yes, and with the current hiring climate, it's really hard to attract and retain psychologists because they're highly desired, and there's a much higher demand than available psychs out there available.
And would that employee work virtually, or would they be on site for those 2 days?
Probably on site, but I think there could certainly be discussions as that if that proposal comes to fruition.
And then lastly, for clarity, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because there's other questions, are you or is the district recommending proposal 2 to be what we look at to vote on, or are you saying both are equal in standing and it's up to the board to deliberate which route we want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think there's pros and cons to each proposal. The proposal 2 definitely takes a lot more of the staff input and feedback. A lot of them were concerned with a lot of the nuances that because we run a school psych in every building, there's a lot of roles that school psychologists play that are overlooked that are different from building to building, where one building they might play more of a behavior support role, and another they might play a larger role in their building's MTSS processes. So I still think both proposals are viable. I think it's just getting stakeholder feedback and looking at what's going to be the best in line with our strategic commitments and meet the needs of our students.
Thank you.
All right, Ben? And then we'll come back to Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Just kind of following Corey's question, that's what I was going to ask too. Is there a recommendation? But what was the time frame between kind of putting proposal 1 out there and how much time the staff had to review it before the board reviewed it?
Yes, I have to think about that. I think we put it out. I'm gonna try to estimate middle of last week, Wednesday or Thursday, and then it went to the board for that Monday meeting. So probably 4 or 5 days initially. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So fairly compressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because we certainly heard in our email inboxes about some of the concerns that I think are probably reflected in
Yep.
proposal
And
2. So, yeah, my question was just taking that or bearing that in mind. I assume you've had some conversations, that brought you to proposal 2. That's reflective, it sounds like, of the conversations you've had with staff. And do you feel like those adequately address their concerns?
I think so. There's different stakeholders have concerns about different parts of this proposal. And, as Dr. Hillman talks about, when we work with limited funds, we have strategic commitments that work against each other. So we have to figure out what's going to be the appropriate balance to meet our goals at the end of the day. So, but I heard a lot of feedback about, buildings concerned that they would only have, a psychologist in their building 3 or 4 days a week, and really feeling a loss between some of the relationships and roles and pieces that they play and duties that they cover.
So if I had to kind of distill it down, proposal 2 sort of retains the school psychologist in every building and gets you kind of those 2 assistant director roles that you were looking for. Is that correct?
Certainly, and a big piece of that is that increased administrative presence in buildings at IEP meetings to play that important role as the LEA representative. I think one of the shortfalls of proposal 2 is less cost savings, which might have to change the scope of some of the add backs included targeted teacher PD that we're hoping to offer.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Caleb.
Yep.
All right, Amy and then Maggie.
Thank you, Caleb, for going to all the schools and talking to everybody. Ben covered a lot about what I was going to say, but I just wanted to say thank you for that, because I think having that conversation really makes a difference in employee satisfaction, and I think people get a sense of what you're trying to accomplish and what they need, and it seems like a really good coming together of trying to make it best as possible for everyone. I'm sad to see that the professional development funds are being decreased, but that's just one of those things that happens with budget reductions, but especially in special services, I would imagine that training is even more important with issues that come up. But we can think about that another year. Thank you again.
Thanks.
All right, Maggie.
I'm curious, in the second scenario, what specifically the reduction in special services administrative PD would be? So that 50% seems like a lot. Can you talk a little bit about what what you won't be able to do because of that?
Yep. So those include legal conferences, legal meetings, and then a few best practice conferences through our professional organization, MACE, Minnesota Administrators for Special Education, coming together for like our best practices conference, where we work with, other districts. We hear keynote speakers. The approach that I had in mind is, still valuing that and just targeting which PD we receive, and then also leveraging regional opportunities, at least for the near future, until we can adjust the budget and reevaluate.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Comment, question? Okay, my question is if you could give us an example of how administrators, the two assistant director positions, would be responding to students directly. I understand the IEPs or other meeting support. I wanted to hear what that looks like when they're responding to students, or how they're responding to students.
Yeah, definitely. So in the new model, the assistant directors, they aren't direct student supports, but they're going to be based in the buildings. And if there's a call in the building where they're working, they would respond, just as Sarah Pratt or I do. We've been in buildings where, we're trained in restrictive procedures and we're trained in crisis de-escalation. And if we're around and available, we will step in and support those situations. And I would envision being based and scheduled in the buildings that they would be more available for that, in addition to their other administrative duties.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Right. Thank you so much, Caleb.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the proposal overall?
I did have a question about the hiring of those. So would the HR director and instructional services director be hired prior to the new superintendent?
Yeah, great question. So we've done a lot of thinking about how do we set the district up for success long-term. So our administrative team, when we knew there was going to be significant transition, did a deep dive into, as I mentioned before, how do you configure positions? Which positions do we post early? How do we make sure we get the best pools for positions? How can we make sure we get the highest quality leaders for the district? Many of the people who are retiring or leaving have worked here for decades and have a deep care for the system and want to make sure that it continues to be as successful as it has been, and so that those new leaders feel the same privilege to serve here that we have. Very clearly, the first thing that needed to be hired were the elementary principals, because we felt that that was a pool that the further we got into the spring, the less deep that pool would be. We were right, 64 applicants, because we were able to do that in February. Director of Special Services, again, we knew that that's a smaller pool of people. And again, both elementary principals and Director of Special Services tend to be hired more so with what you would think of the fiscal year, right? Going from July 1 to June 30th. And so there's just that hiring method is more typical for those positions. And again, with Caleb Davidson, we got an all-star who we're really proud of the work that he's done so far and the work that he will do moving forward. HR and instructional services, in many districts we don't call it this, but in many districts of those be considered cabinet positions, district services. So the intent was, one of the reasons we waited is so that once the board approves those positions, we will post them. And clearly with the new superintendent timeline, we would not interview for those positions until after the new superintendent has been selected. The intent would be I would need to run the process as the current superintendent, but I would invite the new superintendent to be part of the interview process and to be able to have a significant weight, and I'm emphasizing that significant weight, in the final decisions. And so the key part is this is a unique opportunity for a new leader to build their team. And so we intentionally waited for those positions because of that reason. I am not worried about getting quality pools for both instructional services and for the Director of Human Resources. Ideally, it'd be best to posting tomorrow, right? But the fact is we want the process to be solid, and so I am confident that we will get high quality applicants. The district has an exceptional reputation. I can tell you when colleagues in other districts have heard this, I've already had people asking when we're going to post the jobs, and I'm confident you'll get exceptional people, not only to apply, but to be selected, and emphasizing that my successor would have a significant, within our system, right, we have a system of how we interview, very detailed in terms of the number of people involved, and so they would certainly have an opportunity to weigh in on those final candidates.
All right, Corey.
Dr. Hillman, I have a question. I know in the consent agenda, we're approving the hiring of Shane to come back as principal, which is great. And in 2 weeks, we'll vote on the proposal in front of us. With the reduction in time of days, it's roughly 18%. Can you tell us a little bit about how that might look next year with Shane if we approve an 82% principal?
Well, I asked this question of Shane Byer because I knew this would come up, and if you know Shane Byer, he said, I asked, what wouldn't get done? He said, it will all get done. And it will, right? That's who Mr. Byer is. And so I think one of the key things is that what you'll see in the 192-day proposal, again, for 1 year, right, to be able to, this is also an important piece because technically both the high school principal position and the assistant principal positions would be interim. These are essential positions to school district leadership. It would give the new superintendent an opportunity to observe and see how that system works. I anticipate that the high school principal will go back to 235 days. There'll be some kind of piece about the assistant principal number of days at some point in the future. We've been talking with the Northfield Principals Association about that because there's some memorandums to understand that have to happen with that union in order to be able to make that happen. And so I think the key thing is one of the things that since Shane has a tremendous amount of experience in the district, he has been looking at, he may need to work a little less in the summer, and he has a system where he would be on campus full-time for the beginning of the school year, and then there would be specific targeted days throughout the school year where he would not be on campus. And so doing that in collaboration with the two assistant principals to ensure quality coverage. Again, we'd all prefer to have both of those back to the way they were, just like we'd like to have all of the reductions that we made last year back to the way they were. I think this was a creative solution, really Shane being selfless to say, I think it's important to be able to have that assistant principal position back, even if not in the same exact way that it was before, based on a number of pieces of staff feedback, and again, just that continued coaching and trying to prepare for the high school for long-term leadership.
Thank you.
All right, Amy.
This is on a different topic entirely, but I see our two representatives from Wold have been here for an hour and a half, and I know we still have a lot more talking to do. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate and possible for us to take agenda item 7A, an item for action, and just move it up to now and handle that now so they don't have to sit through another hour of all of our discussions. So I move that we just sidetrack briefly to 7A, items for individual action, the bids on the NHS Reimagine project.
Okay, there is a motion to move item for individual action 7A to immediately, rather than waiting until after our reports and our consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Kind of a point of clarification.
Okay.
Were we concluded with that conversation? Were there other questions on the item that we're still discussing? Okay, I'm just curious.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this move? Okay, then we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of moving 7A to immediately, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Items for individual action 7A. Can I get a motion first, and then we'll have a discussion and then move to a vote? Is there a motion to approve the 4 trade package contracts at a total contract award of $19,884,288, and as detailed in the memorandum, which is posted publicly on our website?
I move.
Okay, moved by Corey.
Second.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, welcome, and we will hear now on those bid contracts.
Thank you very much. I will be brief, and thank you for moving me up the meeting here and getting me home back to the kids, so I appreciate that. I'm not going to reread what we kind of discussed last week, but we had bid day on the 27th. The 4 packages in front of you, work scopes in front of you, for fire suppression, the geothermal wells, aluminum systems and glazing or curtain wall, and the electrical. We have 2 low bids and then 2 best values that we went through. All 4 are right in line with our budgets and are all very critical to our construction overalls, our overall construction schedule moving forward.
Okay. Board members, do you have any questions at this time? All right, Ben.
Just a super quick question. So for those of us not in the trades, what's the difference between a low bid and a best value contract?
So we took, if you recall, we had 4 packages that we ran as a best value, which very similar to a normal bidding process. However, there's a scoring system that goes through as part of that procurement. We pick packages that are highly complex and very schedule driven to go through that. We've had Amy part of the scoring committee, Val and Justin, and that scoring is obviously attached to the minutes. So those were so we have one more that is still out there, that mechanical, that is over our budget. So that's what we're working on, have been working on here the last 2+ weeks to get back in line with that.
Thanks.
All right, Jenny, did you have a question?
Thank you. I was just curious, attached to this report for the 4 trade packages was kind of a bid tabulation for the 8B and 26A scopes or sections for scoring anyway. But then there was no tabulation included for the 21A and 22B scopes.
We can get those to you. We have that. I think Val, you probably got the hard copies, but we can get those to you electronically, no problem.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else, question or comment at this time? All right, we have a motion and a second, so we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move back to our items for discussion. And we closed out the financial forecast unless there were lingering questions. No? All right, then item D is the review of the operating levy public hearing feedback.
Yes, so just to reground people who are watching this for the first time, the board is considering using new statutory authority that was passed by the Minnesota legislature in 2023 to renew the operating levy that was originally passed in 2017 one time under the same conditions that the voters approved it. And so that would extend the existing levy from its expiration date by 10 years. We started discussing this back in January. We had formal presentation at the February 9th meeting. We had follow-up discussion at the February 23rd meeting, and on March 19th, we held a hearing, a public meeting as required by the statute, and I've included in the packet an overview of the key themes from the feedbacks that we found across the folks who came. Around 26 people attended the hearing or the meeting. We shared a brief presentation explaining, why are we doing this? Why are we asking the board to consider this? Why can we do it now when we weren't able to do this kind of thing before? What would happen if the board chose not to use its statutory authority? And so then board members and administrators went into breakout rooms, tried to divide out people evenly. Everyone had an opportunity to share their perspective. And what we've done is from the notes that were in each of those meetings, we have used a generative artificial intelligence tool to help identify the key themes that are in the packet. So would be happy to answer any questions or offer board members the chance to reflect on what they heard at that March 19th public meeting.
Good. Anyone would like to make a comment? Okay, Amy, anyone else at this time? All right, and Jenny? Okay, we'll have Jenny first and then Amy.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. Yes, so I have one question and then some comments about this item. Question is, so we had 26 people attend the
That was our count.
public hearing. Was that including us 6?
It would, yes. So I think the count, my understanding was the count that was total for the, both the board members, the staff that were there to support, and the community members. So we did an inclusive count.
Okay, so 20 total community members, not including us board members.
And potentially even less, because that would have probably counted me and Val and Caleb and Aaron, so a few less, yes.
Well, I mean, you're still stakeholders, so.
Of course, as are the board members as well, yes.
Right, but that being said, I mean, we have 19,800 registered voters total in our school district, so that's not something really to, that I'm gonna, hold tight to when I'm thinking about the overall feedback. But another item that I wanted to look at is that during the public hearing, so at no time during the presentation or any other time did I hear about the real issue, which is not should the board, pass a levy. It's should the board bypass the voters to pass a levy. And I didn't hear anything about bypassing the voters in the presentation at all. And there were a couple, well, one for sure, gentleman in our breakout room that was a little confused, and I think he thought that we were talking about the levy as a regular levy that would go to the voters, and that we were discussing, the importance of it and what it would do, where we would use the funds. We answered, or within the room, a lot of those questions were answered, but the entire evening, I just did not hear that word at all from our administration anyway, or our staff. And so that was very concerning to me, that it might be misleading to the public. And then also a second item is that it was mentioned that one of the biggest reasons to bypass voters is the cost of the election. And printed here in our narrative, it was said it was around $50,000. But I think it's important to mention that there's two different costs. There's the cost of campaign and there's a cost for election. And I think that the public right now feels that that $50,000, from what our administration has led them to believe, is the cost of the election. When really the election, from my figures and my phone calls and all of the research that I made, is under $3,000 to put that question on the ballot this November. So $3,000 is the cost of the election, not $50,000. And I just want to make sure that that's made clear, and if I'm incorrect somehow, that someone would correct me. But I just wanted to make sure that the community understands that there's two different costs for campaign and costs for election. And so that was really my two main concerns.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment or want to reflect on what they heard in their room? Okay, Amy.
I was just I have a comment, but I also suspect that Dr. Hillman might have something a response for Jenny. I don't know if you want to say that
Sure,
now,
yeah, I absolutely
while
can.
it's all
Yep.
fresh in our minds, and then I would be happy to go on with the comment.
Yeah, so I appreciate your comment, Jenny, and how the language that you used, and I appreciate you bringing that forward. I do believe that we talked about in using the term statutory authority versus going to the voters, which is different than the language that you shared, and I acknowledge that. So we didn't specifically use that language. We've really tried to be intentional about explaining that we're using the statutory authority that allows the board to renew it without going back to the voters. So that's what we've used throughout the entire discussion. I don't recall that night how I said that. I just don't recall. We have attempted to really explain to people that we're using the statutory authority that has been vested in the board versus going to the voters. And you're absolutely right. The actual cost for the counties, I'm going to trust that I remember being a little bit higher than that, but no more than $4,000. Right? I think you're very much in the ballpark. And then there are some other pieces that are also required of us. Some pieces to put things in the paper, and there's some other parts to it. And I also believe we're required, and I understand your differentiation here between what is actually required for running the election versus what it is to inform the community. And so that's a fair distinction. And there are some required mailings that have to be done, right? That would be in addition to the election. We know that any election that is going to happen, whether it be an operating levy or bond, it no longer starts on election day in November, right? Because once early voting starts, we know that that's when it begins. And that's when we've seen some cost increase, I would say, in the last couple of times, because of this effort to make sure that before people go to the voting booth in September, if they choose to vote early, that they're as well informed as we can. So I certainly accept your differentiation between the two. I would argue there's a few other things we're required to do, and then some other things that I think we're expected to do to make sure that people are aware. And I do want to clarify one other piece. We did take the step of sending a postcard to every district resident, every household in the district, to let them know about the public meeting. We talked about it on KYM and a number of different pieces. So you're right, there's 19,000 or so, registered voters, and we did take that step that we typically hadn't done and weren't required to do to make sure they were, individually notified about the meeting. So I accept your perspective, and I just think there's just a couple of other ways to look at it.
All right, Amy.
So my perspective on this is we did try to inform everybody through the postcard, through various means, and we only had 19 people show up. And that seems to me that it's not an issue of big concern to our community, because when we have an issue of big concern, like we've recently seen a lot of people giving us input on the mascot, we hear from them. But I don't think we've had even one board letter about this, even with the postcard going up. Maybe one, but it hasn't been the same tidal wave of input. So I don't see people being all that concerned. And I even took it to the next level. I'm a member of the Rotary Club, and so that week that we had the meeting, and it was actually that day because we meet on Thursdays, I invited everybody. I reminded, we're having this public hearing, and it's about this, and I explained it, and I'm like, please come show up. I actually did have 2 Rotary committee, Rotary people show up. But I also said to them, if you can't make it to the meeting tonight, please come up and talk to me and tell me what you think. And I hung around after the meeting, and no one was coming up to me. So then I started going to everybody and asking directly. And now I know this is a very small sampling of a specific type of people, but no one was at all concerned. They're like, oh yeah, why are you even worried about it? Just go ahead. So the sense that I have gotten, and I've also asked other people I know that I interact with, my book group, and it's not something that concerns most people, because it's not an increase in taxes, it's kind of a maintenance of taxes where they are right now. So, and high support for education in our community, and I'm not getting that big upswelling of concern for this topic.
Anyone else? Ben.
Yeah, I was going to apologize because I was not at the March 19th meeting. I was in Washington, D.C. at the other end of the political spectrum, the federal end. But the thing I love about serving on school board is just that, I think as reflected by some of these comments, it's probably the most local office you can get, right? And we are a representative. We're elected by the community to represent the views of the community, and at the same time, I think this district in particular does an admirable job of trying to get to that very direct democracy. Like, come talk to us, like send a postcard, have that conversation, and so you can only do that, right? And who shows up in terms of the feedback that they're looking to provide. I mean, we certainly value that feedback. I know we do, and it was certainly helpful, all throughout the high school reimagine project. I think we had good community engagement. The legislature back in, I think it was 2023, amended, 126C to give the boards that authority. And, I think it makes sense to exercise that authority just given what we've heard from the community and the fact that we are, right, elected as representatives of that community overall. So, $3,000, $50,000, I think the reality is we can know with probably pretty good confidence that this is something that the community supports and be comfortable moving forward with it. That's kind of my takeaway. And again, I was apologetic that I wasn't there, but good follow-up conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Corey and then Jenny.
Yeah, I'll just echo a couple comments Amy shared. I mean, we clearly hear from people when they have opinions on issues. We've seen last couple weeks hearing from people on a few different issues, including the special services discussion. We had 3 emails on operating levy, and they were all supportive of the board using the statutory right that we've been given. And part of the reason the state moved to do this is because with a high percentage of 97%, these often get renewed in communities. So it helps with budgeting. We've talked about a couple budgets tonight. With this being 13% of our budget, certainly it would probably make it a little bit easier to forecast for next year without knowing if this is going to come through or not. So I feel confident that I've heard from people in the positive. Certainly there is a discussion to be had about whether it's the right move to do, and that's a fair discussion to have, but I'm comfortable moving forward with the right we have. Thank you.
All right, Jenny?
Thank you. So after hearing from some other board members, I thought of a few more items. So number one, I think the lower turnout might have to do a little bit with the planning for that night. So March 19th, Bridgewater had 6th grade parent night at the middle school at 5:30. So that was quite conflicting. I don't know if that was mandatory or not, but I would say if I had a 6th grader, I would probably be there. And then also the trap team had a mandatory all student and all parent meeting that night as well from 6 to 8 p.m. So same time, very conflicting. And it makes me wonder, if we had 220 people there, I'm not sure how many parents were at that event, but that's a pretty good chunk of people that are probably going to be really active because they're parents of students, and I think that holds them a little bit more to wanting to be involved. So I think that they may have missed out. And then the second thing would be, Dr. Hellman admitted to using the phrase, using our statutory authority. And I think that I really have to wonder, and we won't ever know for sure maybe, but I just have to wonder if that is, like I said before in my comments, people don't understand that that means that we're bypassing voters completely. They are not going to get a chance to vote for a 10-year period. Their taxes will change and increase for a 10-year period. And if they don't understand, if they just listen to statutory authority, to me, that would just mean our normal, operating governance. If I, of course, wasn't a board member, but I know differently. But that doesn't mean that the public knows that. So I'm wondering now, maybe, if things would have been different and we would have received more pushback had we used that phrase, bypassing voters, for that 10-year period. Maybe, maybe not, but I just wanted to mention that.
Maggie?
Yeah, I was just going to add, and I guess echo that I went into that public hearing actually expecting that most people would be there to oppose the board using its statutory authority, and was surprised when the room that I was in was very much in support of the board using its statutory authority. So that and the fact that the emails that we have received from people have been supportive, and I understand and empathize with the challenge of scheduling. My own rising 6th grader was going to that. She went to that event that night. Luckily, another person in my household was able to take her. But I do invite people to email us on this topic. I think, yeah, if you weren't able to make that meeting, let us know what you think, because that is really the only way that we can be representative of the people. And I think that, that opportunity, having the board email out there, is one that I think we know people are using, and I hope that they will continue to do so.
Thank you. All right, Corey?
I want to recognize the conflict because you're right. Same as Maggie, I couldn't go to that event either. I have a rising 6th grader. So there certainly is an engaged number of people in our community who might need to be in 2 places at one time. And you mentioned a couple events, but that still doesn't account for the other 19,000 people who decided not to show up that night. And we've heard a couple people via email. The first time we talked about this was January 12th. We've been talking about this for 3 months. Dr. Hillman's been on the radio every other week talking about it. We've done the postcard. it's been 3 months, people have had the opportunity. At some point, the community has to do their part to engage with us. There's only so much we can do. So I'm certainly empathetic to hearing more voices. I always want to hear more voices. Just like Maggie, I was surprised that we didn't have more people there. And there certainly were a couple conflicts for sure, but the vast majority of people could have maybe been there. We don't know what's going on in people's lives, but 18,000 people and only 15 people showed up. I feel pretty comfortable moving ahead with it personally.
Ben?
Yeah, and I'll just echo, I mean, I think, this board packet gets published ahead of time, people are aware, the door is open. We don't have an overflow crowd tonight. It is exciting as these board meetings can be sometimes. I think the reality is people have, we conduct our business in the open, right? We have good discussions and people have that opportunity to feedback, and we invite it, we readily invite it, which I think is good, probably more so than almost any other branch of government that I'm aware of. We're accessible. Again, there's lots of seating for those watching online. Come down, join us. But I think, the point is that the legislature gave boards this authority for a reason, and I think that's saying that we're considering using our statutory authority as just a statement of fact. If we say we're bypassing voters, I think that gets, you're bending towards the political at that point. So I just want to kind of call out the language for what it is and sort of how I see it and interpret it.
Any other comments? I wanted to add that in my room, we had a couple, so not two separate individuals, but a couple who came in together, and they very much were there to talk about the board voting on it versus the levy question going out on the ballot. So to me, specifically to my room, there were people who understood that this was an opportunity to come by and talk about that, the board voting on it versus sending the question to the voters. And as others have already described, there is an understanding that likely, the question would pass. And so to me, it's also an issue of fiscal stewardship, to understand that we're talking about, as Corey pointed out, 13% or $9 million of our budget, and then to not spend any time sending out information about it, encouraging people to go to vote. All the pieces that we do for anything that we send to the ballot are, many of those pieces are being replicated with this schedule of events that we have since January 12th been presenting this information. So very similar in having forums, having communication, presence on the radio, open, public comment. And again, as Amy pointed out, our community will come out if something is needing to be communicated back to the board. So we've heard comments about the mascot. We have not heard additional comments from the community about the levy. So they do know how to get a hold of us. We have been, as Ben pointed out, been talking about this for a long time. Our items are published. So somehow the conversation about the mascot has gotten out. And I feel like in the same way, the conversation about the levy has gotten out. And I cannot explain why we had such a low turnout. But I do know that I have seen in the past our community members say, I can't make it to that event, so I am sending my comments to you via email, or I am coming to public comment because I couldn't be there. People also like to reach out to us individually, in our circle of friendships. So I know that I have not, no one has come to me personally, but I hear that other people have experienced phone calls or conversations on this topic. So I like the robust conversation. I like that we're bringing up, some issues that people are thinking through and wondering about, and then also having this honest conversation about, yes, a lot of people didn't show up, and that's not the end of the story. There was opportunity to show up, and for those who couldn't show up for various reasons, to have a different opportunity to speak their mind. Additionally, we will be considering the vote April 27th, so there is still time to hear from the community. And I want to thank you, Dr. Hellman, for spending time educating our community since January 12th, and just about every meeting that we've had since.
My pleasure.
All right, any other comments at this time before we move on to item E? Okay, item E is our radar image proposal discussion. That will be an item for individual action at our next meeting, and Dr. Hellman will provide that discussion, will facilitate that discussion.
Yes, I just want to acknowledge Activities Director John Mahal here as well if there are questions that he can assist us with. So what I just want to share is at the next meeting, we're going to ask you to consider one of three options, right? There were the Rally students, which are high school athletic leaders. They facilitated a process going all the way back to September. We actually met with them over the summer. They presented at the last meeting, walking through that process. You know, that process did include an all-call for people to participate in a meeting during Flex to join that committee and to give ideas. About 20 high school students ended up becoming part of that steering committee that met several times during the year. They requested submissions from the community. They did so with, reaching out through our traditional district methods, newsletters, et cetera. KYMN Radio, they did a specialized interview on KYMN Radio. There was pieces in the Northfield News that did yield 30 submissions. 20 of submissions that by our best estimate are from community members themselves. They took the set of criteria that I've included in the packet around original artwork, being free from violence, racism, and harassment, an image that represents all, image using the NHS school colors. They were seeking to prioritize images that were unique to the Northfield High School, specifically from other Big 9 schools. And then there's this piece around images transferring to sports apparel to make sure that do you come up with something that can actually be printed, on a jersey, et cetera. So after they received those submissions, they looked at the criteria and they moved forward examples that met the criteria. Then they came back again and really narrowed it down to a couple of choices that we've brought before you. Now, there's really three options for the board to consider as you move forward, just to be very clear about what the options are. The board could choose to select the one of the finalist images, for example, the horse image. The board could choose to accept the finalist image with the cow image, or the board could choose to reject both images. Want to be really clear that the Northfield Block N is remaining, right? There's no plan to retire that part, much like you see the University of Minnesota using their Block M and Goldie Gopher. This would be an addition to that Block N, just by way of example. And, again, what we did is, as as board members have referenced, we have received quite a bit of email feedback over the weekend, and I would just be straightforward. None of it was positive, right? All of the feedback that we received via email, as far as I can tell, was critical. A couple dozen messages, I think, that's probably a fair way to say it. We also did use a public feedback form using a forced choice analysis strategy these are the two images that were brought through the student process. What do people feel when you look at those two images? There are a number of different ways you could have tried to seek that feedback. We considered a number of different options. At that point, since these were the two finalists that were brought to us by Rally, we felt that it was important for people to say to us, of these two that are remaining, which one do you prefer? I've included that data in the report. We also know that a significant portion of people, about 40%, it looks like left some kind of negative comment about both, right? And so there were negative comments that feedback was able to come through the commentary process. So you have the data in the packet that I shared with you. I really appreciate the community's engagement. I've now had a chance to be part of this twice. And one of the things that I'm pleased with is that people are engaged, right? People do care about this, and that's a good thing. I think in addition, one of the things that I would submit to the board is I do think that anytime you try to select one image that's going to represent such a broad group of stakeholders, I'm not convinced that you could ever find one that wouldn't have pushback, right? So that maybe the last time we did this, the finalist image had pushback, and the board ultimately chose not to accept that image. So I do think that that's our truth, right? That no matter what, I think someone told me that you could put a blank piece of paper forward and you'd probably have some concerns about that. And so I think that's an important piece to frame the conversation. But I do think we want to honor the solid process that these students did. Whether the board accepts either of the images or not, this is one of the things that we do to prepare students for lifelong success by taking an idea that they have, bringing it through the process, and seeing it to fruition. So I understand that this is an item that has generated a lot of concern and a lot of feedback, and I really appreciate that. And this is now the governance question, right? It's really in the board's hands as to how you want to move forward. So just wanted to frame that, and for the people who are watching, and certainly John or I would be happy to answer any questions, but really to me, this is now at a point, and I want to be really clear too, I will not be making a recommendation on this at the next meeting. It will be, I will give you the tools that you need to make the decision. There's more than one choice here, and I think we're at the governance level, so very rarely do I not make a recommendation, but because of the choices that you have ahead of you, it isn't appropriate for me, in my opinion, to make a recommendation one way or the other. So I really think this time is more about how you engage with the process and the results and where you're at and any questions that would help you make your decision.
Fair. Board members, do you have any questions for Dr. Hillman or Director Mahal? Okay, anyone else? Okay, Maggie and then Amy.
Just come up so front.
One of the concerns that we heard was related to the financial implications of adopting a new character mascot. Could we just hear a little bit about how the new logo would roll out?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. Val can help me too. Typically, how we are good stewards of our funds. And so, for example, even when we sunset or retired the previous Raider image in 2021, what we did is we were on a methodical process. When the uniforms would come up for replacement, that's when the image would be changed. And so we would plan to do the same piece here. So we see actually very little additional financial impact. Right now, I think we're in about a total of $5,000 toward this project, and a substantial portion of that, about half of it, was actually funded by the high school booster club to help defray the cost. So the plan that we would have is that we would roll it out in the typical fashion that we would with any uniform replacement. So if there are uniforms that are up for replacement next year that would have been replaced anyway, then at that point, the teams have the opportunity, when they think about how they're going to design their uniforms, to include any new image should they want to. I can see some doing it. I can see some making it prominent. I can see some making it the secondary piece, prioritizing the block end. So we would anticipate it in that way. There's a possibility, there could be a possibility that, some sports might say that, hey, every year we have our student athletes, buy a warm-up jacket or something like that. But those costs would be on the student. John, do you see any other costs? I don't see anything else.
No, sir, you have it right.
Val, do you see any other costs in that?
Thank you.
Good. Any other comments or questions at this time? Okay, Amy and then Jeff.
So this is the second time I've been through this process, and I can't help but think back to the 1950s when they were going through this process as well, and trying to come up with a figure that was a Raider, but that did not reflect back on the defeat of Jesse James himself. And I'm sure they went through a similar process and came up with a different type of Raider. I don't know whether it was Attila the Hun or Genghis Khan, but they were trying to avoid that whole bank raid image. And we're now facing a similar thing. And I really respect how we've had this process, unlike my understanding of the 1950s, where one of the students just drew it out and said, here, and everybody said, sure, that's good. And I don't know whether they had everybody agree with it, or if it was just easy, or if they had a lot of differing opinions. But thinking on this, the question I have really for you, John, or maybe Dr. Hillman, is we're seeing this as something that's coming up through the students, which it is, and the student had a process, and what a tremendous learning experience that was. But it was a smaller group of students, and I would like to have a better understanding of how the students as a whole view the options that are come before us. I mean, we have 78 of them who responded, and so part of it is I'd love to know their breakout specifically of what the students thought. But if this is something that's going to really represent the students, I would love to see the students supporting it, and I don't have a sense at what level sort of the greater student body supports it. So if you could speak to that, John, I would be very interested.
That's a wonderful question, I guess, as you are bringing that up. Other than having the opportunity to be a part of the process early on and throughout everything, I don't know that we have gone back to them now that it's been the last two, because it was really the committees, the student committee that brought, hey, these are the two logos that we are supportive of, I guess, that we really sent that out to ask that question, hey, which would you prefer from our full student body? The only other thing that I guess, and Dr. Munn, you can certainly speak to that too, the only other thing that I would add to that is, again, the students that went through this process, they had great conversation. Leah did a great job of facilitating everything in a very respectful manner. And they also realized that, yes, it's a logo that we want to be able to likely bring forward to be able to utilize, as an option to the end. But they know that this is going to be for the current students that may be at the high school, but it's also for the future students that are, at the elementary and the middle school level. So they know that this has got a chance to be a part of Northfield for years to come. And so they took it very seriously and did a nice job, again, of selecting or getting to that final two to bring to you all. Is that fair, Dr. Ellman?
I think so. And I do think that, updates were included in the Raider update, and the Raider update is included in the Schoology, so.
Correct.
I would say that was one of the ways that it was sought for additional feedback.
Sure.
Just to follow up, could you send us a breakout of just the students and how they answered the questions? Is that possible?
Yes, we certainly can do that, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
Thank you, Amy. Going back a little bit, you were on that last go round. Was that 19? Was that 20 or 21 when we did that?
2021, Jeff, we went back and-
21. So, and I think, as I say, was Joel Lear put together a really good committee. I thought it was done well, and Nuger was in on that. And I don't know Matt had a different thing. He liked the logo, and I came into that last meeting. It sounded like we were all looking at I liked the tipped hat of the cowboy, and we came in, and the whole thing that night just blew up. It just blew up, and I didn't get that at all. I didn't understand why that happened, but that was the final one that we agreed on. It just didn't go anywhere. And I think that one thing that I was going to do in this process is I'd take back to make it a little bit broader, because we got 30,000 people in the district. We got a good solid 20,000 graduates that are out there, and a little bit on we grew up in the Raider. I can tell that story in great detail. There's a huge culture here, and it's kind of like, what I don't want is division. I want unity and diversity and equity and all that stuff, in a sense that I think that I was kind of like, and I went back and all of my going back looking at my uniforms, and actually I got some of my pictures from being in the the 70s, 80s, 90s, and we did a lot of work back then when we did that to get this end to where it is. It's a pretty cool end. As ends go, it's pretty cool. And I'm looking back at all of my old uniforms. We didn't have the Raider guy splashed all over it. We had Raiders and we had NHS. We had Northfield, and that was it. And it's just kind of like, I don't know why we can't, quote unquote, be more. And I went out to a lot of people, and I said, here, this is the thing with the Raiders, and I showed them the horse head and the cow head, and they looked at it kind of like, yeah, what does that have to do with the Raiders? So I didn't get that connection. And these are a lot of people that graduated from here. So, I mean, I'm personally, I don't think for long-term, short-term, I think, you're gonna get, and you would do with any changes, and actually, I was the one that gave Matt that if you use a blank piece of paper, you're gonna get a lot of pushback on it. But I think, and one thing too that I'm gonna say about where we're at now in all of this process, I don't wanna get too long-winded, is this is the most stuff and the longest that I've been on the board. We just got a lot of stuff that we're dealing with. And one of the things that I'm getting is just like almost getting chewed out from people. It's like, man, Northfield taxes are high, school district stuff is that you get this new school, and now you want to throw this logo on there that no, I shouldn't say nobody likes, but I mean, obviously people, but it's just really controversial in a sense. That's why I think, and it's just like I'm happy to be the Northfield ends, and I think that what I would rather see in a sense is like, well, why can't we, if the kids want to, wear and have a cheer zone and be all over the place and be have a, cow or have a horse head, fine, but I don't think that that's going to transfer over well in the long term for a logo, either one of them for the district. And I mean, my vote would be same thing that happened, way back when is I would actually, if I had a chance, what I would have put forward in this process, and even going back, I would put that in as another choice, the one that we had as number one, because there were a lot of people that liked it. I would put that in the mix on this and vote on it. Second thing that we got a letter from somebody that had the idea of a Raider shield, and I think a shield is a really cool idea. You could brand that with an N, and you can make the shield, and I like the value of the townspeople, rising up the townspeople and having that other stuff on there. So I think that from the diversity idea and trying to take the N and finding some unity out of that, anybody that wants to come out and how they want to use something, as long as it's reasonable and they want to do that, let's embrace that. But when it's just gonna be, ugh. So I would actually, just knowing what I know now about this stuff too, that my instinct tells me that I would put in the hat in there that we had that. But I mean, I would just be like, no, I'm the generic Northfield N guy, and I like the N actually. I didn't think we were the N's before, and I got all kinds of uniforms. I was looking back, we were all NHS, whatever else. We didn't use the Raider guy in hardly anything back then. It's just people say that all the time, but I mean, we're pretty generic uniforms, and our maroon and gold is, we're a knockoff of the University of Minnesota. We always want to make sure that we get the maroon and gold colors right, because after walking through the high school years ago, the colors are all wrong. So I think especially with a major project that's going on like that, to try to get people more into unity. And I'm not saying third time's a charm or whatever else, but I'm not necessarily feeling on it. So when we get to the point of that, I'm going to be a no vote on that. But I also want to encourage, if kids want to cheer and do whatever else, show up. If you want to be the old Raider guy, or if you want to come up with some other things, just get out and cheer on your Raider team and your activities. So anyway, that's my comments.
Okay, Jenny. Thanks, Claudia. So on our agenda, it's stated we are to discuss the public feedback for the Raider image. And so I wanted to just make a couple of comments about that. One is the incredible amount of emails we received from community members that were all negative. I don't just want to state that and then leave it sit there. So I want it to be a little bit more encompassing. So I read all 347 comments of the feedback word for word. And I sort of kept a tally because I thought, well, maybe that's really different from the emails we received. And in fact, sometimes it is. But so I counted 245 of those 347 were negative. 75 were positive, and then 27 were neutral, meaning, like they said, well, I'm choosing this one, but I don't like it because it doesn't relate to the Raiders, or, another comment was, I'm choosing this one, but I'm afraid the kids will get made fun of. So I just kind of counted those as neutral because they were picking one, but they didn't really like it. So that's a lot of negative comments total. So then I thought, well, there was a few comments that maybe those people should have been a part of the submission process. And I mean, it was offered. So then I thought, well, maybe there was a disconnect. So I went back and I took a look at how our community was notified. And so one was through the family updates, which are given to basically anyone who has a student here and has an email. So although that was only published in one family update, and for context, the Later Start Times was published in 3 family updates. The public comment on health standards was published in at least 4 family updates. The levy renewal information was published in at least 5 updates, because I didn't go back like more than half the year. And then pertussis, which is also very important, don't get me wrong, was published in 2. So I think we kind of had a disconnect there. The Schoology Post is students only. The Radar update, there were 2 publishes in the Radar updates, but one only had 631 views and one had 1.4K views. And as we know, we have 30,000 stakeholders total. So that's just really not reaching a lot. KYMN and Northfield News, unless you're followers or subscribers, you're not going to get that. And so how did we get this information out to anyone else? I just don't think that we did. I think we failed there. And I think that's the reason that we received so many negative comments. I know Dr. Hillman published a little letter for us saying the public invitation was clearly heard. 20 of the 30 image submissions were from parents and community members. That's probably very true, but there's a difference between being clearly heard and clearly notified. And like I said a minute ago, I think that that's where we failed. We just didn't go far enough to make sure that the community got notified on something that, if we were to put this logo on the new building, and I would hope that new building would last at least 100 years, that's 100 years of seeing the image and having it be involved in the community. So I think it was very important to have to go and do what we could, do our due diligence to notify as many people as we could. For example, I know we were talked about the mass mailings before, the postcards and things like that. That could have been done. And I know that that's costly. In fact, I even got the price to do it, to both publish it and then to mail it out. I think it was like $800 to publish, and then maybe like $2,000 to send out, somewhere along those lines. So kind of spendy, but there's a lot of mailings, such as this one, the marketing for tobacco, which is also, again, important, that the district paid for, but it didn't have anything to do with, our school, really. It was a great amount of information, but nothing to do with our school. So I know that we have the resources and the ability to have sent out a mailer to make sure that the entire community was, at least had the chance or to take a look. And we just didn't do that. And so I'm really disappointed that we couldn't have gotten it out to the entire community.
Ben?
Can I make just one point?
Sure.
So Jenny, I appreciate that. Thank you for doing the tallies. I appreciate your perspective. I want to be really clear about the tobacco piece that you mentioned. That was, Val, I don't believe that the district paid for that. That's an HCI expense. So it does come from the school, but it's a partnership with HCI. So just to be really clear about that came from and there are a few of those, there'll be a couple more yet this spring, that are collaborations between us and HCI where they actually pay for it. We actually charge them for the envelopes, and we do stick the stickers on them to send them. That's a partnership that we have right now. But I just want to be clear that that's one that was not in that case.
Yeah, I think I echo a little bit what Amy said. I appreciate this was a student-led initiative, and probably this was something that was important to them. As the rally group kind of brought it forward and thought about what does this look like, and I think it is worth noting that 2/3 of the submissions came from the community, not from the students. So and 30 is quite a bit, and that seems like a significant number to me. So the word got out. I think I'll take a little bit of the contrarian view and say, like, given all that we have to worry about, these are nice to haves, not need to haves. And at the same time, I recognize it's important to the community. I think back Jeff, what you were talking about. I grew up at Washburn Miller. He was the guy with the rolling pin. We never had him on our football uniforms. You know, it was always for good reason, right? But, you know, so I think what I'm understanding, John, is that, you know, there's flexibility in terms of how teams, events might want to incorporate a logo. Any logo, some might prefer to stay with the end just because it's cleaner from a design standpoint. So, you know, I think that flexibility is there and will always be there. You know, I would acknowledge the cow is it's kind of cute, but and my alma mater, McAllister, changed their mascot to the Highland cow not that long ago. So cows are not unheard of. And I would also recognize that, you know, one of the teams in the Super Bowl this year also has a horse as its mascot. So, you know, again, horses not unheard of. I think the challenge is it's all stylistic, right? If we walk out this door, not one of us drives the same car, not one of us lives in the same house, right? So it really comes down to a style choice, you know, and we're never going to satisfy everybody in that regard. You know, is it something that's reflective of a process that's student-led, that has ties to the community? Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Dr. Hillman, I think in a couple of the responses, you call out the fact that, yeah, I mean, if you go to one of the 15 reenactments during Jesse James days, you're probably going to see a horse. Like, and I think given some of the good constraints that were put on the logo process itself, you know, it's logical that probably is one of those things that's going to rise to the top, you know. We're the Raiders, that is clearly a reflection of what happened in 1876. That kind of limits the, you know, kind of what you're going to tie that back to from a practical standpoint, or at least I guess as I think about it. So again, to kind of just bring my thoughts and reflections around, you know, I like the fact that the students brought this forward. I think it's always going to be a challenging process to find something that everybody can agree on and say that's absolutely great and perfect. And we still have flexibility, you know, in the end. I like the end. I share your love of the end, Jeff. It's a good end. So, you know, I think that's just it. If we did this a year from now, if we did this 5 years from now, we'd probably have the same discussion because we can't all agree, you know, that this is the perfect mascot. So I just thank, you know, the students for initiating the process and kind of hopefully learning through it and kind of seeing, you know, just the steps that go along with it. So I will be quiet now.
Thanks, Ben. All right, Corey?
So I have a few thoughts, and they're reflective of what other board members have said. First and foremost, appreciate that the students have brought this forward, because after 5 years of an N, there was a desire to have more identity than that. But I agree, the N's great, and as we've heard a couple times, that's not going away. But this comes down to identity, and students want to be represented by something greater than just a letter. It's going to be difficult to find something that suits all flavors, as Ben just said. I think that would be an ongoing debate forever, and we could come back every 5 years. Of what's been brought to us, and again, I guess I want to go back to the conversation we had about the operating levy. We clearly have heard from people on this. It would have been nice to have a little bit sooner. I don't know if you recall, Dr. Hillman, when the first time DYC came to us. I feel like it was last spring to pitch the idea of looking into this. I was trying to look through prior notes, but that would have been a year ago. Not that that means it gets in front of everyone's eyeballs.
I think our first meeting was this past summer. I want to say it was early June, if I remember our first meeting with the rallies. Because remember, this came from Rally, not from District Youth Council.
Correct, thank you for that correction. But it obviously picked up in the spring, and then there was a campaign to get submissions, so people had their opportunity to be engaged on it. You know, I look back, we had 18 emails that have come to us last week. From my understanding, that's from some online discussion that has been energizing that, which is great. We want to hear from those people. You know, and I appreciate those who've submitted new ideas, even though that for now has, you know, sailed. Of what we have in front of us, I'm comfortable with the horse. I think the cow, to Ben's point, is unique. And I've spent a lot of time in the last 6 months looking through the Minnesota State High School website and looking at other options that Minnesota schools have. I've also looked at colleges and minor league teams, because I actually think mascots are interesting. And I think the more unique, the better. I mean, Blooming Prairie is the Awesome Blossoms. You know, there's a lot of unique things, and every community is different and feels different for what they want to represent them. Our challenge here is trying to make something fit to a name that is challenging. I'll leave it at that. But I think the horse has a connection to that. I think it does respect and reflect the history of the town without going all in on the discussion we had 5 years ago, which was, do we represent the bad guys or the good people? So I'm comfortable with it. I want to respect the desire of students of having something that represents them. I ran this by my 2 kids. That's 2 kids out of 3,800. They both were okay with the horse. They could see it as a future Raider. But again, as Director Mahal and Ben pointed out, there's no requirement for these to be on jerseys. It might show up on the building at the high school. It could be on jerseys. It's an option. And I think it's about building consistency and clarity for the branding of this district moving forward and trying to weed out some of the challenges we've had with logos and just having a consistent voice of what the Raider identity is. And I think if we can come to a consensus on something, that's good. I don't know if this is going to be it, but as Ben pointed out, we've got a lot of things in the hopper right now. So it'd be nice to put this one away, but totally understand if the board's not there either.
Can I just make one comment based on a few things that people have said? I think regardless of where the board goes, obviously the N, which I do find it, because when we retired the Raider guy, we had a lot of feedback that people were not quite as happy with just having the N at that time. And a few years later, people are satisfied with, which I think is a good thing. I think that's the testament to the power of something that is clear and recognizable, right? So I think everybody agrees that, the block N is an excellent representation of the community, and even if you were to choose one of the 2 finalists, it's not going away. I do think, to Corey's point, to a couple of other people's points, I think one of the challenges that we face is that, we've gone from a time, as Jeff said, back when we used just NHS or the N, going 70s, 80s, and I would say in the 90s it started to change, where you started to see, I think some of us probably advancing in screen printing, where you would start to see people use more of these kinds of figures, and branding became such a big deal. And so you did see this proliferation of images that would accompany traditional logos. And I think one of the challenges, just alluding to Corey, is that we have not had a district-adopted branding guide. So what I would consider the board to consider is, regardless of what you decide, right? If you say, nope, both of these appreciate everyone's effort, neither of these are good enough for us right now, totally appropriate option for you to select. And if you stick with the N, what I would suggest is that, or regardless of what you pick, is that we're working to develop a policy around branding for you so that it's really clear, Jeff, to your point about, do we have the right maroon and gold, right? So putting actually in the policy, saying, and wouldn't just necessarily be about the N, it would also be about the Northfield Public Schools logo. Where can it be used? How can it be used? Is it licensed, right? You could actually start to license some of these things so that you have a little bit of greater authority over the brand, and so that it isn't, I don't think we have people who intentionally misuse or things like that, but I think from time to time, people have a good idea and they slap it on a t-shirt, and that defrays the brand, right, that you're trying to do. So regardless of how the board shakes out on this decision, I do think it would be wise for us, just in this environment, to create a branding guide so that people are super clear about, here's what our name is, here's what the acceptable images are, etc. So I think that's important for you to consider.
Good. All right. Corey has a follow-up. Jenny and both Jenny and Jeff. So Corey, then Jenny, then Jeff.
Thank you. I had a lot of things floating around. I just want to second what Amy said about trying to hear a little bit more from student voices. Of the 18 emails we received, the vast majority were from community members, which their opinions certainly matter for this. But this logo, first and foremost, is about representing students in athletics and activities. And I think those are the most important voices in this. So I would love to get a little more feedback from students before we make a decision to make sure it aligns with their comfort and what they think could be proud. I think for a lot of reasons we said at the last meeting, maybe you had a couple nice definitions or definers for what this logo could represent. People might perceive that differently. We saw an email today where someone, said some negative things about it. I think that would be the case with any animal. But I would like to hear more from the students because this is who it represents the most. Thank you.
Okay. Jenny?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to mention that I would definitely be open to a new mascot. I think it would be great to see something in addition to the N also. But I also want to be very careful and not be ignorant to the clear response of our entire community of, do not choose either. I mean, it was it's very clear when you, and I don't know if anyone else read all 347 comments, but so many were very frustrated with that process, and that's where I'm getting it from. I'm not getting it from, people that called me or texted me. I read it from the report that Dr. Hillman furnished us. So many had said that they were forced to choose one or the other on the survey in order to leave feedback. So they were not allowed to even leave feedback unless they chose one of the two. I don't think that's fair, and I think that's probably why we're seeing a lot of anger. And I'm not saying that we have to redo this process altogether, because I could not even imagine how many hours and resources have gone into it. But just to pick something, I don't think that's right either. So I honestly don't, I don't want to direct anyone to do anything, but I just want to make it clear that I'm not going to be ignorant to what happened there and the disconnect, where people were not allowed to provide feedback, which is the exact point of a public survey, is to allow them the feedback. We did not allow them that. And they are upset, and I honestly think they have every right to be. And as Dr. Hillman always says, when community members are really upset, you say that you see that as a good thing, because it means that they care.
100%.
And obviously, the entire community cares a lot about our image, as they should. It's our image. And I think that every voice has should have an equal representation. Parents, students, teachers, staff, neighbors, business owners, whoever you are. If you are a part of our school district, I think you should get equal representation by us board members. And I'm just not going to be ignorant of all of that and just choose one just because it's on our agenda. I think that's something I just wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I did that.
All right, Jeff.
I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Maybe we should put the cart before the horse. Sorry, I mean, that's a pun, obviously. But thank you. Shows at 9 and 11. I'll be around all night. I do love the idea, actually, of like it's getting to be is like branding and identity. I mean, or whatever that is with what you just talked about. And I think we need, as a board, let's just look at that and see where we're at, and come up with some other ideas. Maybe this is it, but I am for obviously tabling or saying no to both these images and looking back at something. And maybe we need how would we look into that to have a branding and make that part of policy and get into that with expanding that and look at it, and maybe we start out with an end. So I really think, because people are really upset about taxes and stuff like that, if you start putting different stuff out on the big brand new school, I mean, we got enough challenges just to get the thing built and whatever. When you start adding all of that in, and if we know the N isn't going anywhere, we've got that for whatever else. So I just think, what are other school districts and whatever doing? Because you're right. I think when we look at the 70s, 80s, whatever, it wasn't all about the images and different things. Now you've got, everything's about branding and images. So I think that we should, as a board, look at that and just decide how are we going to move forward on that and make that a long-term and short-term decision process.
Yeah, Jeff, we have a sample as we look, there's not a ton of districts that have a policy around, but we do have a sample policy that we're looking to update and to just, even with what we have now, regardless of how the board were to choose to move forward, we're working on it, and we should be able to have it to you yet this school year.
All right, Ben?
Just two quick follow-ups. I mean, one, I think the design of the survey was to say these are the two finalists, right? Which
Correct.
do you like? So it wasn't these are the two finalists and would you like something else? People had the opportunity to share that, and they did. So I just want to call out that was the intent of the survey design. John, would it be, I don't mean to suggest or just ask an open question, to Corey's point on student feedback, is there a mechanism by which you could get that, over the next 2 weeks? Again,
Absolutely.
kind of looking at those two
I think
design choices.
we can use the technology that we have within the district to be able to send something out to better understand what our current students, where they're at, and what they would favor or not.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and clearly, I mean, forced choice analysis is a very typical way when you're at this point in the process. But I also understand and recognize some of the feedback that we received about that. And so if we do a student-only piece, we can certainly modify that feedback tool to include, some other options as well. Not necessarily an open option, but to be able to provide some options that would not simply be between the two finalists. We felt we were getting to the governance process here, so trying to give the choice between the two. Certainly accept the criticism and appreciate it, and as we move forward, if we do a student-only survey, we can certainly rectify that in that area.
Would it
Amy?
be too much to ask the students what idea they have for a logo? I mean, is that opening up
Yeah, I don't.
something? I mean, because it might be interesting.
Should stick with this process, get the feedback on this process, and then move forward. So leave it at having the students give feedback on the images, and if we want to include a neither option or some other version of that, I could see that, but rather than, because then that seems like we're opening up the process to submit your suggestion now. Anybody else want to comment at this time?
I really appreciate people's feedback and the way that you've interacted with the community on this. It is certainly one of those things that creates feedback, and that's a good thing. And as I've said many times, as Jenny said, that we want to hear from people, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise. So I appreciate the people who have connected with us. And 200 and some people, we had more people fill out this form than the other survey that we recently sent out related to the superintendent search. So I think we did get some good feedback, and I certainly, of course, accept both comments about the appropriate and positive comments about the process, and also every process has its flaws, and we always continuously improve. So I appreciate people's critical comments of that too. It'll make it better for the next time.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone, for your comments, and we will move on to our next item, and that is policy 802, disposition of obsolete equipment and material. Dr. Hellman, would you like to make any comments on that? This will be an item for action at our next meeting.
And I'll ask Val to weigh in on this one too a bit. So this goes back to the situation with the MacBook Air sale that we had a few months ago that we shared with you, where we are engaged with a winning bidder, a winning low bidder, who then ended up not fulfilling the contract as they presented. We're still working through it. We've received 50,000 of the 142,000 bids so far. Again, we know lots of companies do net 30, kinds of things. We've had done this process several times before without issue, but we do feel the need to make sure that we respond and protect the district in the future. So this policy would add to the areas of contracts from $25,000 to $175,000 and contracts less than $25,000, basically saying that for any sale, we would have to have the wire transfer clear or the check clear before any kind of acquisition of equipment would happen. It also does include, we do have some other vendors, and Val can speak to this. We have at least one vendor who we have used for years. It's a little bit different, but it would fall under this policy. And we would like to be able to make recommendations to the board that would allow a vendor to be exempt from that piece. An example is an auction site that we use. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, Val.
Sure. So for kind of our everyday disposition of equipment, buildings and grounds facilitates a process where if there's, the one I would see most is probably like kitchen equipment that's no longer utilized, but could definitely be used somewhere else. We use public surplus, which is a very common nationwide company, and I will say the dollar amounts aren't the large ones, so I think we'll be fine in that regard, but we could in theory have a scenario where we have a company selling, for instance, when we're talking about the high school, we're likely going to have a company come in and auction off anything that we determine is no longer needed. And so it would just allow for that opportunity if it's already a known trusted vendor, to make sure that we're not tying up current vendors who are already serving our needs well.
So we're just presenting this to you tonight. We'd ask you to approve it at the next meeting.
All right. Questions or comments? Amy?
Would there be an escrow option for people, is that the right, where they want to where they don't trust the school district, so they want to put the money in a account that's escrowed, and then and there's lots of online ways to do that these days. So, do you ever have that type of question?
I've never had that question, but we've also never required this to date. So I truthfully don't see that being a concern. School districts by default are pretty trustworthy in terms of getting their bills paid and that sort of thing, just because of the way we have to operate. So I suspect if the businesses were concerned about getting the equipment and that sort of thing, that they would not bid. But we'll find out once it's implemented. I would say the vast majority would just do a wire payment. That's not usually a big concern, and that's typically a same day recognition where they could come get the equipment the next day, that sort of thing. So, but we'll see what happens, and we'll respond as needed if that arises.
Anyone else on this policy? Okay, thank you. The next item is the later school start times discussion. There's an updated timeline, and so Dr. Hillman will speak to that new updated timeline, including the data that we're waiting from Benjamin Bus.
So let me just pull up the table file where that file's in. So we have talked with you in March about just some delays that we had in getting data from the bus, legitimate delays why we didn't get the data from the bus company as of yet. We understand we're going to get those that routing data this week. We are targeting Wednesday is what we understand that we'll receive that data. So back in March with that, we asked, did the board want to continue forward with the process? What I had understood is that people were interested in continuing forward, and so we've put together another timeline here. I do think, as I've shared with board members, I think one of the questions that we have with the time that we have remaining between now and June 30th, when I move on from the district, I certainly have shepherded this and helped this, but is this the board priority? That's one of the questions I've had. Board members have told me overall, yep, if we can keep this thing going, we'd like to keep it going. So you'll see that we just have changed the timeline a bit. So we would be able to provide you with an update and discussion at the next meeting. We should have that data from Benjamin Bus. I know it's a fairly robust agenda on the 27th, but if this is the place that you want to continue forward with it, that would be the time to at least have an initial conversation. Then we would basically move forward the proposal at the May 11th meeting. We would start promoting a community input meeting for May 14th, again, similar to what we saw for the operating levy. I have to say, I would like some thought. Do we want to do a postcard to everybody about that? This kind of falls within that piece of where this really affects more so parents than it does the broader community. So that's just a question I'd like you to weigh in on. And then we'd be able to, have some additional discussion at May 26th, and you could make a decision on June 8th should you choose. Now, I do think there's a pathway to hand this off, to be able to have the work done and to be able to hand it off moving forward. Remember, no implementation would happen until 28, 29. So you could basically take a decision that's not specific on details, but more so directional for implementation. I know that just with a number of other things that we've been doing, this is, is the number of other things we were doing. I just want you to make sure that you know where we're at and that you have some choice as to how we move forward. So we would be able to pull this off in terms of be able to provide a community input component. We believe that we can market it so that people who are affected have a chance to be there. Again, to other board members' credit, there's going to be there's always a lot of things that conflict. It's very few nights in the district where there is nothing. I'll look at something, there's nothing that night, and then it turns out there's a band concert or something, right? Because there were no sports that night. So Kelly has looked at that May 14th date. The middle school auditorium is very clearly, we will obviously have some conflict with some spring sports, and some other pieces there. But this is a timeline that could work for you. So I just want to take any feedback that you have about the timeline and any other feedback about how you'd like to see us bring this forward.
Okay, thank you for doing that, Dr. Hillman. My first observation is that we'll be losing a work session, And that work session was intended to receive the data from
Yep.
Benjamin Bus and have a discussion around that. So what you're proposing is that that information would come to us at our next regular board meeting, and that's where we would have the discussion. So
Correct.
that's something for board members to consider if, you're, besides the agenda being full, if you're comfortable with letting go of a work session and taking that data on at a regular meeting and having that discussion.
And just to be clear, I was
Perfectly
trying to be
reasonable.
cognizant of the other meetings that board members have this spring, right? We know there's been some things added to the list, so I just want to be cognizant of your time.
And then do we lose one, because of the timing, are we needing to lose one of the discussion meetings, one of the regular meetings? I think there were 3 after the public input initially.
That's a good question. My initial recollection is that you would have had a chance to discuss it at 3 meetings, the proposal formally at 3 meetings, so you'd be down to having, well, you'd have something at the April 27th meeting, you'd have the May 11th and the 26th for discussion, then with a decision on June 8th. If you so chose to, again, this is a proposed timeline, right? So you'd still have, 3 meetings where it would be discussed before a decision. You wouldn't have a formal proposal until May 11th, but you'd still be able to discuss it, at May 11th, May 26th, and June 8th.
Okay. Do board members have any questions or comments on this timeline or anything else they want to provide at this time? Okay, Jenny?
Okay, thanks, Claudia. I am more than fine with giving up a work session. I think that these meetings would give us, I would say, plenty of time to raise any concerns that we have. But my question is, for the April 27th meeting, it says the board will discuss costs associated. How?
Yeah,
Will you have all the exact costs and all associated, or only the data from Benjamin Bus, or not from Benjamin Bus, but your own calculations, or where is that going to come from, and what is it going to entail?
Yeah, thank you for catching that. We updated this timeline, and so that particular piece was from a work session, so I apologize for that. What we anticipate to be able to have would be, because the biggest cost driving factor here will be the busing, and so I will have to wait until this Wednesday to know what, exactly I'm receiving, and then between Val and I will, be able to do the best that we can to be able to cross-reference that. So I think that the data that we get from the bus company will really drive what we'll be able to provide on the 27th. I'm confident that we'll be able to give a good, especially a couple of years out, right? I mean, since we're talking about implementing in 28, 29, there's a couple of there's at least one bus contract, to be settled between now and then. So it would be some forecasting to a certain extent.
Right, I understand that, but I just want to make sure that we have those forecasted amounts in plenty of time before a public input session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And we will give you what we have, and we'll give you our confidence level on it, if that makes sense, in terms of, I think that we'll be able to get you information that will be helpful for that. And if it's not, and you tell us that, we'll get you something else.
And then my other question would be, would it be similar to, was it 2018? When you sent out the surveys to parents and teachers?
Yeah, so that's a fair question. I mean, I think that there's a couple of ways we can do that. We certainly could use a survey to gain feedback. That's certainly a possibility. The public meeting, right, is also one way to be able to get the feedback. So there are a variety of ways that we can collect feedback once we have a more detailed proposal for what people are knowing. I think one of the main differences between 2018 and now is that for the 2018, I think you're right, that was I don't remember exactly, that sounds right to me. We were talking about implementing it the following year, in that fall. And so there was and that was one of the things that we learned with some of these larger major decisions that really have an impact on people's day-to-day. We think giving people a longer runway, to be able to adapt to whatever changes is helpful. So I just want to point out, I think that that's a difference between 2018 and now, though a survey is certainly appropriate.
Yeah, I would request that, because I don't know if any other board members have looked through that old survey. Amy, I'm sure you have. I shouldn't say the survey, the feedback information. It was extensive.
Significant.
I mean, not only in the numbers of the hundreds, but also in their answers. They were very precise, very detailed. And I just wouldn't want to take that away from people again.
Agreed. Yep. And we have better tools now to even analyze that information. So
Right.
it's not Matt and others just trying to bucket that for us, right? So
Right, thank you.
Good. Right, Maggie.
I'm comfortable with the revised timeline. I think, like Jenny, I think a survey would be a really good idea. I have on my calendar a elementary band concert that night at 7.
of course you do.
But maybe it could be squeezed in, the public meeting somehow in between kind of the end of the workday and that. But I was wondering with the survey, I think one of the key things about this, one, it being so far off in time, but also kind of what are the details? Like, what does it even mean? I think I would love to see maybe an explanatory video that outlines for people what we're talking about, because I worry that someone might see headline survey, take the survey, and not really understand the details of the proposal that they would get if they came to the public meeting. I don't know if we've ever done that before, but I just worry that, one, people won't be able to come to the public meeting at that time of the year, and then also that they won't have kind of the full proposal, and they'll have to think a few years out, like, what would this mean? Where would my child be at this time?
And that's why conflicting with an elementary band concert, I think, is pretty important, right? Because, so we'll have to go back and take a look at that. And I do think it's challenged once you hit, I mean, as we've discussed tonight, nearly any time of the year, there's almost no evenings that there is nothing on the calendar, right? So we can go back and take a look and see if there's a different date. I do think the other part too is that I appreciate, and certainly we have the ability to generate the video that you're talking about. I just think a couple of things for board members to consider would be that we will get it done, but it will put a strain on our current capacity. So just want to be honest about that. I try to tell you what we can do, and we try to under promise and over deliver to the best of our ability. The further that we get into that kind of piece, the greater the capacity issues become. The second part that is a dilemma with this particular piece is what we tell people now may not exactly be what happens 2 years from now. You know what I mean? So that's the part of, is it more ethereal and philosophical with you having the details of the money, right? But if we say school is going to start at 8:12 a.m. on this date in 2028, and it doesn't, right? It may not be a concern to you. I want to be upfront with that. And I do think we're almost at 9 o'clock. So in terms of any.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and take a motion to move beyond 9 o'clock. And then you have a question, or you wanted to put a motion out? You have a question. Okay, so let's do this motion first. Okay, so let's see. Is there a motion to extend our meeting beyond 9 p.m. tonight?
Motion.
Okay. Thank you, Corey, and seconded by Amy. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll extend past 9 o'clock. Ben, you had a question.
Yeah, and I think it was on that point, Matt, right, rather than getting into kind of the granular detail, something that the board could contemplate might be something like recognizing that start times after 8:30 for middle school and high school, et cetera, within the next year, we come up with, a detailed plan, but that plan should include X, Y, and Z. I mean, I assume that would be
That would be an option, yeah.
Right, so it's committing to future work. It's committing to a later start time by a certain date, but also recognizing that devil's in the details, and that'll have to get worked out. So we could say directionally that's where we want to go, but specifically how we get there, we don't have to figure all that out by June 8th.
Fair enough. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important, just to sort of give ourselves that latitude to recognize that that's an option. We don't have to solve and trap for every iteration as part of this in the next month and a half. Still recognizing that it's probably, the data are clear that would be desirable, and also I think acknowledging that here's relatively the financial impact that would have on the budget, because we should have those numbers, but those numbers would change as well. I mean, it's going to be an estimate. It's not going to be absolute. So that's helpful, because I think I would be more comfortable with that, just given kind of the compressed time frame that I know that we're on, than trying to say, well, this is the bus, every single bus route, every single
Right.
pickup time, and that's just not gonna happen.
And I'm sure that it's natural then to ask for the more nuanced details, and we won't be able to provide that. So that's something to consider. Somebody else had a, okay, Amy?
First, I want to thank you for putting this together, Dr. Hillman. And also, I was part of the Later Start Committee back in 2018, and a lot has changed since then, from basically, the roadways that we have to people's approach to working from home or not working from home, and it's a different world in the last 10 years. But that being said, you asked about who should get any sort of notification about the public meeting, and I would like to suggest that it goes to any families of school-aged children in the Northfield area. And I would include like St. Dominic's families and Prairie Creek families. Maybe Arcadia might not be as big a deal, but maybe it would. I mean, there's not that many, so couldn't hurt to include them as well. So anybody who might be considering the Northfield School District. But I would not feel the need to be telling absolutely everybody, all the retirees who have no children in the schools, or, or the college students. I mean, we don't need to do that big a mailing. As far as a video, depending on the timing of when the survey would be online, we could have a video of your presentation at the public meeting. Plus, we already have the presentation given by the woman who spoke to us, that we could make available, which was very helpful as far as why this is important. And it seems like we could have a few different, there could be a brief article explaining why it's important too, for people who don't want to sit through video. They could do some reading, and then they would have some background to comment on.
And with any video, we'll also tell them they can watch it on 1.5 speed.
I do that because of you. I do that for podcasts. I watch it fast too.
Okay, so I heard that people are comfortable letting go of the work session, that people are comfortable with the compressed timeline. We are going to look at the community input, community meeting date, give that another try, and we're still hoping to finish our discussion at our regular board meeting June 8th. All right, we will move on to our next item then. Okay, next is the consent agenda, and as a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to that consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent grouping?
Motion.
Thank you, Maggie. Is there a second? Okay, thank you, Jenny. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next, we have our items for individual action. We already went through 7A, so we will move over to 7B. And I'll take a motion first, and then we will discuss and then move into a vote. So is there a motion to approve the cancellation of the contract with Lance and Megan Manti for the purchase of district property parcel number 17.11.3.75.021? Thank you, Ben.
Second.
Second,
Jeff.
Jeff. All right. Would you like to give some comments?
Very briefly, as you know, we had worked with this family to purchase this very small piece of property near the district shop. They intended to use it as a way to gain access to property that they own behind the district shop. Just issues with zoning and some other pieces with the city of Dundas, they were not able to make it work like they thought, so they are canceling the purchase agreement at this time.
Thank you. Questions or comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. And then finally, a motion to not live stream the special board meetings to be held on April 16, April 24, April 25th, and April 29th. Who will move?
Move.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Second by Maggie, all right. So, to reiterate, all of our meetings, including these special board meetings, are open to the public, so people can be in our audience. What we're asking is that we suspend our practice, it's not a policy, a practice, a good practice to record and live stream these meetings. And so I just want to, if there's any questions about that, we can discuss. Otherwise, we'll move to a vote to suspend the practice for April 16, 24, 25th, and 29th. Questions or comments? Yeah, Amy.
I certainly think we should suspend the practice. I'm wondering if we would still be recording the meetings and if we're required to record them at all. And if we want to, if we're not required, but if we want to for legal purposes or for future reference or anything like that, or whether we should just skip recording them entirely except for minutes.
I see. Right, and make sure I wrote that down correctly. So the motion right now is just to not live stream, so you'd like to add to not live stream or record?
Well, I'm just asking sort of what our approach will be. And I guess I'm open to recording them if we think we need them for some future purpose, but I don't think they should ever, their interviews at least should ever be publicly posted.
Any other comments on that? Corey?
The motion in front of us has a line at the end that says, if the board chooses to record the interviews, MSBA recommends posting only the recordings and interviews for the candidates who are moving ahead in the process as a professional courtesy. So there is a process to post them after
Thank
the
you.
fact. That way the public can see for themselves how the finalists performed.
Okay. Thank
That's
you.
how I read this. I
Mhm.
would defer to anyone else who has other interpretations.
Okay, Maggie?
I would say unless there is a legal requirement to record them, I would vote not to. I think I assume it's extra labor and also extra digital storage that we don't need to contribute to.
Yep, thank you. Okay. Does anybody want to amend the motion to add not to record?
I do.
Well, you're saying
Because it says motion to not live stream, can we say motion to not live stream or
or
record?
record. You're saying, oh, yes. Okay, so, correct, yes, thank you. Yep. Okay, so we will vote on this motion, and there is a process for recording and posting at the meetings. We'll vote on this motion. If it does not pass, then we can amend it. Yes, Kelly?
Am I wrong to believe that with Robert's rules, you can choose to amend a motion? You don't have to vote on the motion that's on the table. So you can go ahead and amend it and then vote on it after the fact.
And I was gonna, sorry.
Go ahead.
And I was gonna suggest maybe further discussion before we decide if that's the route we want to go anyhow.
Okay.
Okay.
I do a point of information, Matt, to comment on that. What do you think would be normal procedure?
Yeah, I think it's, I think it depends on the district. You're not required to record anything, right? You're not required to record meetings. It's not a requirement. And then I think you're debating about a variety of different things in terms of the appropriateness of live streaming interviews, which I can understand and make sense. And I think it depends on the district. I think there are some districts that record nothing when it comes to their superintendent interviews. I think there are others that would, we've seen some that have recorded and then posted them. So I don't think there's necessarily a standard practice, and I think that you need to think through what's best for you.
So the bigger benefit of the public would be to what? To be able to see the recorded?
Just to have it. Yes, Ben?
Yeah, I guess if I read MSBA's note there, I mean, the benefit is to, if whoever you move forward, if people weren't able to be in attendance, that they could see it, right? You know, it's like why those two candidates, why those three candidates, something like. And again, just to state the obvious, I think the reason not to live stream, right, is to give subsequent candidates an advantage, right? You know, hopefully hopefully people wouldn't watch, but then they would know essentially what the interview questions were. I'd be curious, maybe, to Corey, your point, maybe amend the motion to say, and determine on April 16th in conversation with MSBA if we want to record or not. I don't know if we have to get that specific ahead of time, but I'd just be curious from their perspective if they see any reason not to or benefit to do that in our conversation with them on the 16th. Just a thought.
Right. And we won't have time then to vote on not recording the meetings.
I guess unless we just honor the decision that comes out of that conversation on the 16th. Is that a special board meeting?
Yes, on Thursday.
Yeah, so you could make a motion and vote then to decide.
At the top of the meeting?
Right, or after we've had the discussion with MSBA.
So back to what Corey was saying, that there is a process if the board chooses to record the interviews and then a recommendation of when to post those. So I think there would be wiggle room then for us to vote on not live streaming, and if we could record and then work through that process on the 16th. Does that sound fair? Corey?
I don't think I'm following that conversation. I think the difference between what I'm suggesting, which is the motion at hand, and Maggie is not posting the videos at any point, not record them and post them, is what you're suggesting, correct?
Correct.
And I think the policy as is, or the motion, it's after 9, right? The motion is fine because we just had a long conversation about transparency and community engagement, and I see this as an opportunity after we finalize our final list on that Saturday to then post the video, and then there's a 4-day window for people to see the interviews with the 2, 3, 4 people we put forward, excuse me, and then reflect back to us. I could see it either way, but I feel like if we go that route and don't do that, it opens us up to criticism for not conducting these in a public space, even though the meetings themselves are clearly open to the public.
Okay.
That's my thought on it.
Yep, that's fair. Any other comments? Maggie, do you want to?
Sure, I would just say two things. One, the law requires that these interviews be held in open meeting, but they don't require that they be recorded. And I'd like to just, remind us of that. And I also, we've heard MSBA say several times that we are the hiring authority for the superintendent. It's the only employee we hire. And I know that people will weigh in, but I don't see putting the recordings as a necessary part of that.
Okay, Amy?
So I'm sort of following in line with you, Maggie. I don't see a time where we'd want to post the recordings. If we made recordings, that we'd ever want to post them, because these are people's personal lives, and once they get on the internet, they're there forever. And I just feel like that would be unfair to the semifinalists and the finalists to have anything living on the internet, following them around, whether they do good or bad, whatever. My only question is there a reason to do it for legal reasons? Like if the applicant promises that they're going to get our graduation rate to 100% and they don't, and we said, but you promised. That's not a real case, but you get my idea. So would we want to have that? And I would say I'm not even that concerned about that, but that would be the question I have. So if I had to choose, I would say, let's not record.
Okay. Ben?
I think I'd echo what Corey said in the space of transparency. This is a public, people are recognizing it's a public process. When they apply, they know they're going to get interviewed in public. Really, it's just sort of capturing what they already said in a public space and making it more widely available for those people to move forward. Should the community want it? I think that's generally what our community expects, is that level of transparency. And it's a little weird, right? Most of us don't sit down and say, let's get videotape for our interviews, but that's the way these are structured, right? It's just the nature of this particular position. And so because they're public, then we can make them widely available in public, take it down after the fact off the YouTube site or whatever. I mean, we can choose how long we have it up. Yeah, once it's up, it's up forever. But I guess, yeah, more in there. My tendency is to say more, let the community at least have access to that, just so that they're informed about our decision-making process.
Okay, Jeff?
What is the open meeting law that is it compliant either way with open meeting law? Do it either way?
It'll be compliant either way. Jenny, do you have any thoughts on it?
I'm actually good with publishing them or not publishing them. I'm kind of torn. I mean, I see the points that everyone's made very strong points for one side, and I've also heard very strong points on the other side. So I'm kind of in between.
Okay. So it sounds like people definitely are okay with not live streaming, and we have a motion a second. So why don't we go ahead and vote on that? And then if somebody wants to put a motion for not recording, we could vote on that piece, yeah? Okay, so we have a motion a second regarding not live streaming the special board meetings to be held April 16, 24, I'm sorry?
You could make it 2 motions. You also have a motion to amend, and you didn't take a second on it.
I was asking if anybody wanted to amend.
So Maggie already motioned to amend. Oh, okay, got it.
So am I,
It's his original motion.
Not live stream. Not live stream. Sorry. The motion as it stands.
the motion as it stands is to not live stream the special board meetings, and it does not speak to recording.
Yes, it
Are we
does.
saying the same thing?
It's a long motion. It says it's being recorded.
Go back to.
That's why Maggie
In the
was offering
memorandum, MSBA's recommendation is motion to not live stream the special board meetings to be held on those dates for the purpose of determining and interviewing superintendent candidates.
This is what I'm reading. It shows.
And so the memorandum also gives details on what to do should we choose to record, not record. But the motion that I put out there and was moved by Ben was just a motion, moved by you, it's just a motion to not live stream the special board meetings on those dates.
Okay. I'll let you and Kelly figure it out later.
Yeah, okay. There is a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will not live stream the special board meetings on the particular dates. Yes, Amy?
I would like to make a motion that we decide about recording or not recording after we have the meeting or during that meeting. Just what Ben, yes, what Ben suggested earlier, that we make a decision at that meeting about what to do about recording once we can confer with the MSBA people as to.
Point of information.
Yeah.
Do we need to make a motion to that point? I think we could just have the discussion on the 16th and then decide if we wanted to vote then on something.
Oh, true. So we'll add it to the agenda. Is that the way?
That works. Yeah, great.
Part of the table file that will include in the special meeting an item to discuss the recording and posting of the meetings.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
We're getting this.
Whew. It's all good. All right, item 8 is our items for information, and we have an enrollment report. Dr. Hillman.
I will let the enrollment report stand and take any questions that people might have.
All right. Questions at this time? Okay. And then we have a superintendent search update from Maggie.
The report is in the packet, so I won't read it out, but on Thursday, we will have a special meeting here in the district boardroom. It is an open meeting, so the public is welcome. And we will deliberate and select finalists for the first round of interviews, which will begin at 4 p.m. on Friday, April 24th, and continue at 3 p.m. on Saturday, April 25th.
All right, we'll move on to item 9, which is our future meetings. Those will be April 16th, a special board meeting in this boardroom, April 24th, 4 o'clock, also in this boardroom. the first round of interviews. April 25th, 3 o'clock, the continuing of the first round interviews. Monday, April 27th, a regular board meeting in this boardroom. April 29th at 4 p.m., special board meeting. And Monday, the 4th at 5:15, another special meeting to approve the superintendent's contract. That's all the business that we have tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Second? Thank you, Jenny. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?